Chapter 4605. Deep in the Dark Forest. The Golden Armor General, disguised as Zhuowen, shuttled through giant trees. Every time he shuttled, the Golden Armor General would drop a small, inconspicuous disc array on the trees along the way. Roar, 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 roar. Eerie and terrifying roars rang out in the depths of the dark forest. In the darkness covered by the trees, pairs of scarlet eyes slowly opened, as if they were spying on something. Whoosh! A teleportation light lit up beside the Golden Armor General, and a figure immediately appeared nearby. There are more ghosts and evil spirits in the depths of the dark forest than in the demonic corpse cliff. It's an extremely advantageous terrain for me. Zhuowen stopped on a giant tree branch and shot out a beam of energy from his right hand, shrouding the Golden Armor General. The countless ghosts and evil spirits lurking around the dark forest stopped in their tracks the moment they charged over. Pairs of scarlet eyes first glanced at the Golden Armor General and Zhuo, one in confusion, then dispersed one after another. They could sense the aura of their own kind from Zhuo One and the Golden Armor General. You continue to set up the temporary teleportation array here. If anyone comes to trouble you, try to go to the places with more ghosts and evil spirits. Zhuowen sternly instructed the Golden Armor General. Then, he turned into invisible water and blended into the depths of the black earth, his aura completely gone. After Zhuowen turned into invisible water and blended into the depths of the earth, the Golden Armor General continued to shuffle through the depths of the dark forest. At the same time, he carefully set up the disc array for the temporary teleportation array. The countless ghosts and evil spirits in the depths of the dark forest turned a blind eye to the Golden Armor General. They shuttled past him without looking at him. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At the same time, on the periphery of the dark forest, a group of figures were rapidly moving into the depths of the forest. This group was Golden Lamp Dharmaraja, Ghost Child, Sakyamuni, and others. Roar, roar, roar. Ghosts and evil spirits swept out from the darkness and attacked this group of people indiscriminately. Golden Lamp Fuwang held the magic lamp in his hand, and the flame of the lamp burst forth with endless golden light. Many of the weaker, evil spirits and ghosts were destroyed by the golden light, and some of the stronger ones retreated in advance, hiding in the dark, not daring to approach Golden Lamp Fuwang. Sakyamuni, Ghost Child, Blood Robe King, and the others were smart enough to stand within the range of the lantern's flame. For a moment, the ghosts were unable to approach them. The deathly silent forest is the most terrifying and dangerous place in the extraterritorial battlefield. What did Zhuowen want to do here? Do you want to die? In the team, the Blood Robe King Xue Feng licked his bloody lips and said with a frown. Maybe he felt that he couldn't escape, so he gave up and entered the deathly silent forest to seek his own death. The Ghost Child said eerily. Sakyamuni took a deep breath and said solemnly, "Everyone, it's best not to underestimate this child. I've dealt with him a few times, and I know that he's not the kind of person who gives up on himself. I'm afraid he has other ideas." Golden Lamp Dharmaraja nodded and said, "I agree with nephew Shurtian. Zhuowen is indeed extraordinary. Whether it's his temperament or strength, he's more terrifying than any young genius I've ever seen. Don't underestimate him." Ghost Child smiled and said nothing, but he disagreed with Golden Lamp Dharmaraja in his heart. He was one of the 3 kings of the alternate ghost realm, and his strength had reached the late stage of law phenomenon. Gong Shuequan and the others were no match for him. If he encountered Zhuowen, Ghost Child did not think that Zhuowen could cause any trouble. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja, Sakyamuni, you've overestimated Zhuowen. After all, he's only at the inverse ancient star level. No matter how strong he is, what can he do? You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Blood Robe King curled his lips and said with disdain. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja and Sakyamuni frowned at the same time. They felt that Blood Robe King and Ghost Child were too complacent and did not take Zhuowen seriously at all. You two are indeed a little too cautious. Our team has gathered the real top battle strength of the 9 great domains. If we really encounter Zhuowen, We'll kill him in a second, Guan Ihan said lightly. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja and Sakyamuni still felt that something was wrong, but they also felt that Guan Ihan's words made sense. They knew very well how strong their team was, and it was enough to destroy the entire Archean Heavenly Tao Academy. Rumble. When they entered the deepest part of the deathly silent forest, a terrifying sound of something breaking through the air suddenly swept across the darkness. The countless ghosts and evil spirits that were originally surrounding the light's source screamed shrilly and fled in all directions the moment the sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Rip! The sound of something breaking through the air was so fast that it swept in front of them in the blink of an eye and tore apart the surrounding golden light source. Everyone saw a huge black claw sweeping across the darkness and mercilessly grabbing at Golden Lamp Dharmaraja. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja snorted coldly. His right hand formed a palm and suddenly blasted out, colliding heavily with the black claw. Bang! Continuous sounds of explosions rang out in the air as the black claw was blasted into the darkness by Golden Lamp Dharmaraja's palm. However, Golden Lamp Dharmaraja could not help but take a few steps back. What's that? Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw Golden Lamp Dharmaraja take 2 steps back. They could not believe it. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja was the strongest in their group, stronger than Blood Robe King, Ghost Child, and other late-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts. After colliding with the strange black claw, he only gained the upper hand, but did not completely crush it. This meant that the owner of the black claw was probably also at the late stage of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Be careful, that's a pre-level ghost. Its strength is extraordinary. Jin Deng Fuwang suddenly tossed the golden lamp in his hand into the air. The flame of the golden lamp suddenly swelled up and turned into a golden flame dragon. It circled around the crowd and formed a golden flame barrier. In an instant, everyone in the group looked dignified and did not dare to be careless. Pre-level ghosts were extremely powerful and had the strength of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Especially in the dead silent forest, the strength they could exert would only be stronger. They dared not be careless. I see. Zhuowen wants to lure us into the depths of the dead silent forest and rely on these ghosts to get rid of us. Blood Robe King suddenly thought of something and said. When everyone heard this, they suddenly realized that Blood Robe King's guess was the most reasonable. What wishful thinking! With our lineup, even if the most powerful pre-level ghosts in the dead silent forest come out, they will only be killed by us. He wants to rely on external forces to get rid of us. Isn't that wishful thinking? Ghost Child sneered. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja smiled faintly and said, This is the sorrow of the weak. They always want to rely on external forces. Unfortunately, this method will only backfire. As he spoke, Golden Lamp Dharmaraja formed a seal with his right hand and waved it to his side. Instantly, the surrounding golden flame barrier spewed out terrifying golden flames that had never been seen before. They rolled out and burned the countless ghosts in the surrounding darkness into ashes. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 4606. The golden flame released by Golden Lamp Dharmaraja was very powerful. It could restrain the formless ghost fog, such as evil spirits and ghosts. Any formless ghost that came into contact with the golden flame was basically burned to ashes and disappeared silently. Rip! Suddenly, the huge black claw in the depths of the darkness could not help but attack Golden Lamp Dharmaraja again. It tore the surrounding golden flame into pieces and attacked Golden Lamp Dharmaraja. Good timing, I've been waiting for you. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja sneered. He leaped up and released his law phenomenon. His law phenomenon was similar to his. It also held a huge golden lamp and stood between heaven and earth, shining and dazzling with golden light. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja did not expand his law phenomenon to the terrifying extent of 1,000,000 feet, but only shrank it to about 1,000 feet in order to make it easier to move and not alert the enemy. 1,000 feet seemed huge, but in the surrounding dark forest, Where the giant trees were tens of thousands of feet tall, 1,000 feet was nothing. Roar! The moment Golden Lamp Dharmaraja released his law phenomenon, the pre-grade ghost in the darkness roared angrily and attacked Golden Lamp Dharmaraja directly. The pre-grade ghost looked more like a giant bird. When it spread its wings, it was thousands of feet in size. Its body was shrouded in a strange black fog, making it difficult to see its specific appearance. Humph! Golden Lamp Dharmaraja snorted and went up directly. He held the golden lamp in his left hand and punched out with his right hand. As he punched out, the rolling golden flame swept out and surrounded his fist. It collided heavily with the ghost flying toward him. Bang! 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 The power of the collision between the two was simply too great. Dozens of giant trees in the surrounding area actually crumbled and shattered into countless fine powder. The bird-like ghost let out a low roar and its huge body flew out, knocking down many giant trees before falling to the ground in a sorry state. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja snorted and retreated dozens of steps in midair before he could stabilize himself. Roar! The ghost stood up again and let out a loud roar. It flew toward Golden Lamp Dharmaraja again, completely unafraid of death. This pre-grade ghost is very powerful. It took 2 hits from Golden Lamp Dharmaraja and didn't die. When the rest of the team saw this scene, they looked at Gue Mei, who had launched another attack with fear. Just when everyone's attention was attracted by the battle between Jinding Fuwang and Ghost Charm, a figure quietly appeared on the trunk of a giant tree. The sound of his feet landing on the tree trunk immediately attracted the attention of the spectators. Then, numerous gazes involuntarily shot over. When they saw the figure standing on the tree trunk, they were first stunned, then they were overjoyed. It's Zhuowen! I didn't expect him to be in the depths of the deathly, silent forest. Haha, I've finally found this piece of trash. It's really a case of traveling far and wide in search of something, only to find it so easily. Everyone was overjoyed. There were already some people who couldn't hold themselves back and used their movement techniques to chase after the figure on the tree trunk. Zhuowen clearly saw the group, and a trace of panic appeared on his face. Without a second thought, he fled into the darkness of the dense forest. Little bastard, where do you think you're going? The blood-robed King Shui Feng was the fastest. He turned into a blood shadow and took the lead to chase after Zhuowen. So fast, Zhuowen, who was fleeing into the darkness, saw the blood-robed king chasing after him. His pupils constricted and his speed increased. Roar! 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 The moment the blood-robed king chased after him, the ghost charms and evil spirits in the darkness launched a frenzied attack. Get lost! The blood-robed king roared. His whole body was covered in a sea of blood that suddenly spread in all directions. The blood was as viscous as slurry. When the ghost charms came in contact with it, they were corroded into white smoke. However, because of the obstruction of these ghost charms, the blood-robed king's speed decreased a lot. He could barely keep up with Zhuowen's figure. Damn it, what's going on? Why is this kid not affected by the ghost charms at all? The blood-robed king noticed that Zhuowen was unimpeded in the darkness. The densely packed ghost charms completely ignored Zhuowen. Suddenly, in the darkness, a huge black-armored humanoid figure that was thousands of feet tall strode toward the blood-robed king. He held a heavy sword in both hands and slashed at the blood-robed king. The blood-robed king's eyes were gloomy. He moved his 10 fingers in front of him. Countless blood rays condensed in front of him and turned into a blood-red vortex that blocked in front of him like a shield. Boom! The heavy sword slashed at the blood-red vortex. A terrifying force erupted, forcing the blood-robed king to retreat dozens of steps. The black-armored humanoid figure also retreated. Its huge feet kept stomping on the ground, causing a loud sound like an earthquake. What? Another ghost charms of the lower realm. The blood-robed king's face turned ugly. He did not expect to encounter another ghost charms of the lower realm. Moreover, this ghost charms of the lower realm were not weaker than the one Golden Lamp King had encountered. Roar! 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 The black-armored humanoid figure did not have much spiritual intelligence. After being repelled, it still rushed forward fearlessly and collided with the blood-robed king. The blood-robed king did not want to be entangled with a black-armored humanoid figure. However, the latter had locked onto him so tightly that he could not escape. When the rest of the experts saw that the blood-robed king was entangled with the black-armored humanoid figure, they had no intention of helping. Instead, they continued to move toward the depths of the forest. Zhuowen had the resources from the ruins on him. That was a huge amount of wealth. Whoever obtained it would be able to obtain endless benefits. It was even possible for their cultivation base to advance, and the forces behind them to rise to a higher level. At this time, whoever could kill Zhuowen and obtain the resources on his body first would be the first to arrive and become the final winner. Damn it, this group of people really deserve to die. I shouldn't have rushed to the front. The blood-robed king's heart sank when he saw that the rest of the experts had no intention of helping him. He knew what this group of people was up to. Sakyamuni, Ghostchild, Guani Han, and the others continued to pursue Zhuowen. Their hearts were burning with greed. Everyone wanted to take all the resources on Zhuowen. However, as they continued to move deeper into the forest, the number of ghosts gradually increased. Many of the experts were entangled by the ghosts and could not move forward. Sakyamuni and Ghostchild were very smart. They did not rush to the front. Instead, they stayed behind. With the blood-robed king as an example, they naturally would not foolishly rush to the front. That would only lead to them being blocked by the ghosts. When that happened, they would no longer be able to continue to pursue Zhuowen. Soon, the group chasing Zhuowen gradually decreased. There were only 5 or 6 people left. The distance between them and Zhuowen was getting closer and closer. They were almost within reach. Zhuowen, you're dead meat. Surrender now, Sakyamuni shouted. When he was more than 10 meters away from Zhuowen, he suddenly blasted out a palm. Terrifying golden divine power poured out, condensing into a huge golden palm that was dozens of meters wide. It fiercely blasted toward Zhuowen. The speed of this palm was simply too fast. In the blink of an eye, it appeared behind Zhuowen and ruthlessly slapped his body. The moment the golden palm fell, a blazing white light suddenly emerged from Zhuowen's body. It completely enveloped him, and then he disappeared. Chapter 46:07 Rumble. The giant tree that Zhuowen was on instantly crumbled and turned into countless fine powder. Sakyamuni's face was gloomy as he stared at the crumbling giant tree and said in a deep voice, "A temporary teleportation array? This kid is really cunning. He actually set up a temporary teleportation array here. Is he trying to play catch with us?" Ghostchild said with an ugly expression. "Oomph. His aura has long been within my grasp." Sakyamuni's right hand made a grabbing motion, and a golden ray of light suddenly shot out toward their left, all the way into the depths of the forest. "Oomph. He won't be able to escape." Sakyamuni sneered and took a step forward. His entire body burst forth with golden light like a blazing sun as he pushed forward, crushing all the evil spirits in his path. When Zhuowen's figure appeared at the teleportation array, Sakyamuni was already there. His right palm blasted out once again and fiercely pressed down. Zhuowen was caught off guard and was directly suppressed by the golden palm, falling to the ground in a sorry state. "Caught you." Sakyamuni's eyes revealed a smug look. He suddenly raised his right hand and lifted Zhuowen into the air. "Ha! As expected of nephew Shirtion. Since we caught this kid, let's quickly leave this place." Ghostchild laughed and said excitedly. Sakyamuni nodded. After confirming that the aura in front of him was indeed Zhuowen, he used his supreme divine power to imprison this kid's body, and then quickly retreated out of the deathly silent forest. There were many early-stage evil spirits in the depths of the deathly silent forest. They did not want to stay here for too long, or else it would be troublesome. Among the remaining 6 people, other than Sakyamuni and Ghostchild, there were 4 mid-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts from other super realms. When they saw Sakyamuni and Ghostchild capture Zhuowen, they opened their mouths but did not dare to speak. Whether it was Sakyamuni or Ghostchild, they were both stronger than them. It was impossible for them to snatch it by force. Sakyamuni glanced at the remaining 4 people arrogantly. He exchanged glances with Ghost Child, and the 2 of them turned into 2 streams of light and quickly left this place. When the 4 people reacted, Sakyamuni and Ghost Child had already disappeared. Damn it, Sakura and Ghost Child took all the advantages this time. It can be said that we've wasted our efforts. Among the 4 people, a blue-clothed old man was so angry that his entire body trembled as he roared. Sigh, there's nothing we can do about it. After all, the 2 of them are too strong. If we try to rob them, I'm afraid they'll silence us. Another beautiful woman said helplessly. The other 2 revealed bitter smiles, and their hearts were filled with a deep sense of loss. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, a terrifying movement came from behind them. They all looked behind them, and their expressions changed drastically when they saw a 1,000-legged worm that was thousands of feet long rushing toward them at an extremely fast speed. The worm was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in front of the 4 people. It suddenly opened its huge mouth and spat out a green, highly corrosive venom, which instantly enveloped the 4 of them. The 4 people shouted and used their movement skills to barely avoid the green venom that was flying toward them. Whoosh! The huge body of the worm came from behind and instantly flung over, sending the 4 of them flying. The 4 people groaned as blood flowed from the corners of their mouths. They barely managed to stop themselves on 4 giant trees. It's a pre-stage ghost demon. The old man in blue robe's expression changed drastically. He looked at the huge worm in horror. He could feel that the worm's aura was stronger than the previous ones. The 4 of them might not be its match. We're surrounded. We can't escape. The beautiful woman looked around in fear. She saw that they were completely surrounded by a dense group of ghosts, blocking all their escape routes in a circular formation. What made them feel even more hopeless was that among the ghosts that had surrounded them, there were still other pre-stage ghosts. Although these pre-stage ghosts were not as powerful as the worm in front of them, they were more than enough to stop them and prevent them from escaping. Now, we can only fight with our lives on the line. Among the 4 of them, a young man of few words slowly walked out. He released his divine power that was as deep as the sea and released his lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The other 3 people sighed softly. They knew that they had no other choice but to fight. The 4 of them released their celestial bodies and took the initiative to attack the giant worm. The 4 of them were all at the intermediate stage of the celestial body. When they joined forces, they could even fight against an expert at the advanced stage of the celestial body. However, the worm was too powerful. The 4 people's attacks were not effective against it. Instead, they were forced to retreat by the worm's terrifying attacks. In the end, they could only barely resist. Just as the 4 people were fighting the worm, under a giant tree not far away, drops of invisible water seeped out from the ground. The invisible water kept condensing and finally formed a figure. He was none other than Juowen. After he turned into the invisible water, he had been hiding underground to observe the situation on the ground. After confirming that most of the people who were chasing him had been separated, he knew that his chance to fight back had arrived. From now on, the prey will become the hunter, and the hunter will become a dead man. Intense killing intent burst out from the depths of Zhuo Wen's eyes. He silently disappeared from where he was and headed toward the battle between the 4 people and the worm. Bang! With a loud roar, dozens of large hands whizzed over and slammed into the blue-robed old man's body. The old man in blue groaned and could not help but fly backward. At this moment, the old man in blue suddenly felt an extreme sense of danger. He turned his head and was shocked to find that a young man had appeared 10 meters to his left. You, Zhuowen? The moment the old man in blue saw the young man, his pupils shrank to the size of needles, and he screamed in disbelief. Wasn't Zhuowen captured by Sakyamuni? Why did he appear in front of him again? Could it be that the Zhuowen captured by Sakyamuni is a fake? That's not right. The appearance and aura are exactly the same. Then this is... The old man in blue was filled with thoughts. However, he did not see that Zhuowen had released a huge spiritual sword essence that was thousands of feet long and slashed through the air. The terrifying sound of air tearing was heard and interrupted the old man's thoughts. He realized that Zhuowen did not come with good intentions. However, Zhuowen's timing was too accurate. It happened to be the moment when the old man was sent flying. That was when the old man had used up his strength and had not recovered his strength yet. At this time, he did not have any extra strength to resist Zhuowen's sudden attack. Chapter 4608. Die! Zhuowen slashed the sword fingers on his right hand, and the sword essence slashed down and penetrated the old man in blue. All of this was done cleanly without the slightest hesitation. It was to the extent that the blue-clothed old man didn't even have the slightest chance to think. Poof! The old man's celestial body couldn't withstand the power of the sword essence and collapsed. The moment the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth collapsed, the soul of the blue-clothed old man suddenly drilled out. Unfortunately, before it could escape, it was torn into pieces by the power of the soul sword intent. The moment the blue-clothed old man was killed in an instant, the other three people immediately noticed what was going on. Zhuowen, why are you here? The three men's faces changed drastically as they looked at the young man hovering in the air in disbelief. I'm here to kill you. Zhuowen's expression was calm as he took a step forward with his right foot and suddenly flashed towards the beautiful woman. The beautiful woman's expression changed slightly. She waved the divine weapon in her hand and wanted to fight with Zhuowen. However, she ignored the worm not far away. The worm spat out a mouthful of green venom and enveloped the beautiful woman. My celestial body. The green venom was too terrifying. The moment it came into contact with the beautiful woman's celestial body, it started to dissolve the energy of the celestial body. In less than half a breath, the celestial body was completely corroded. The beautiful woman's soul couldn't escape and was completely annihilated. You can't even withstand a single blow. Zhuowen laughed mockingly. He stepped in the air and forcefully changed his direction and rushed toward the third person. This person was a burly middle-aged man. His strength was considered average among the four people. At this moment, he was still resisting the worm's terrifying attack with difficulty. He saw what happened to the beautiful woman and the old man in blue. Fear rose in his heart, and he revealed his weakness. He was blown away by the worm and vomited blood. Zhuowen naturally wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. He rushed out and appeared in front of the middle-aged man. He slashed his sword and cut him into two. Damn it! How can this kid be so powerful? After the silent young man blocked the worm's attack, he quickly retreated and looked at Zhuowen with fear in his eyes. Now, the situation was too unfavorable to him. Not only were the ghosts around him eyeing him covetously, but Zhuowen was also prepared to kill him at any moment. He did not understand why these ghosts did not attack Zhuowen. Roar, roar, roar. The giant worm seemed to be a little impatient. Its huge body suddenly rushed toward the young man, and its speed was even faster than before. This guy, the young man's expression changed drastically. He raised the divine sword in his right hand and slashed out over 1,000 times in an instant. Streaks of sword chi covered the entire space like a spider web and bombarded the worm's body without restraint. The worm's body looked weak and boneless, but in fact, it was very tough. The sword chi could not break the worm's skin at all. The young man's face was gloomy. Just as he was about to launch his next attack, a terrifying sound of wind breaking came from behind him. He saw that Zhuowen had launched a fatal attack at this moment. Zhuowen pointed his sword finger across the air, and the soul sword essence broke through the air and swept toward the young man's back. There was no doubt that if the sword pierced through the young man's back, his soul would be destroyed as well. However, Zhuowen had chosen a tricky time. It was when the worm was attacking him with all its might. This also meant that if he blocked the attack from the front, he would be pierced by the attack from the back. If he blocked the attack from the back, he would be pierced by the attack from the front. The young man smiled bitterly. He suddenly put down the divine sword in his hand and looked up at the starry sky covered by the giant tree's leaves. It's been a long time since I looked at the starry sky seriously like this. The young man muttered to himself and closed his eyes. He knew that he had to pay the price for his greed, and the price was his life. Puff! The soul sword essence and the worm hit the young man at the same time. The terrifying explosion drowned the young man and completely annihilated his body. Whoosh! At the moment when a young man died, the soul sword essence hovered beside Zhuowen again. You shouldn't have coveted the things on me, Zhuowen muttered to himself before disappearing from the spot. The surrounding ghosts turned a blind eye to Zhuowen and even made a path for him. Since Zhuowen had refined many of the pre-grade ghosts, his soul aura had more or less carried the powerful aura of the pre-grade ghosts. It was because of this aura that he could be like a fish in water among the ghosts. This was also a plan that Zhuowen had long thought of. Who's next? Zhuowen's voice resounded in the forest as he left. Sakyamuni and the ghost child were very fast. In less than 15 minutes, they had left the core area of the dead silent forest. In the outer area of the dead silent forest, the number of ghosts was much lesser and their strength was much weaker. The two of them were not in a hurry to continue their journey. Nephew, Shirtion, take this opportunity to take away this boy's storage artifact. I'm afraid that there will be an accident, the ghost child said to Sakyamuni. Hearing this, Sakyamuni thought for a moment and nodded. Senior is right. Let's search this boy's body. As Sakyamuni spoke, he placed the imprisoned Zhuowen on a tree trunk and began to search for the storage artifact on him with his divine thought. However, the moment his divine thought landed on Zhuowen's body, the latter's body suddenly surged with a terrifying energy that had never been seen before. Immediately after, Zhuowen self-destructed under the two's shocked gazes. Boom! 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 The terrifying sound of the self-destruct resounded and swept out in an instant. The giant trees were smashed into powder and the ground cracked open, forming a deep abyss. No one knew how long the explosion lasted before it finally subsided. The surrounding area was in a mess. Sakyamuni and the ghost child were lying miserably in two huge pits. Their clothes were tattered and their auras were weak. This is fake. Damn it, we've been tricked again. Sakyamuni's body surged with golden light as he leaped up. His face was completely ferocious and terrifying. He did not expect to be tricked by Zhuowen again. It was really infuriating. This boy's methods are impressive. He can actually make the puppet's aura exactly the same as a real person's. We actually did not detect it at all. The ghost child also leaped out of the deep pit. He was in a sorry state, and his face was covered in dust. His face was so gloomy that it seemed as if it could drip water. He should still be in the depths of the dead silent forest. This time I must find him. Sakyamuni's eyes were gloomy. He was completely enraged. He waved his right hand, and a scroll appeared, floating above his head. Inside the scroll, there was a ghastly atmosphere. Strange black shadows were constantly moving around, as if 100 ghosts were walking in the night. 100 Ghosts' portrait. The moment the ghost child saw the scroll, his face changed slightly. He knew that Sakyamuni was really angry. Otherwise, he would not have used the 100 Ghosts' portrait. However, the ghost child was quite happy. He knew that with the 100 Ghosts' portrait, he and Sakyamuni would not be restricted like the first time they entered the dead silent forest. Let's go. We must kill this boy. Sakyamuni's killing intent soared. With the 100 Ghosts' portrait above his head, he rushed into the depths of the dead silent forest again. The ghost child followed closely behind. Chapter 4609. In the depths of the deathly silent forest. Darkness was everywhere. Ghosts and evil spirits were shuttling back and forth in the darkness like 100 ghosts walking in the night. If one looked carefully, one could see that these ghosts and evil spirits were crazily rushing in certain directions. And the direction they were rushing in was where the experts of the human tribe were trapped in the depths of the deathly silent forest. Sizzle, sizzle. The frightening golden flame danced in the darkness. The bird-like ghost let out a miserable shriek as it was incinerated by the golden flame, completely disappearing from the world. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja's eyes were gloomy. He secretly thought that this ghost was really difficult to deal with. It took him a lot of effort to get rid of it. They have already gone after Zhuowen. I have to go quickly. I can't let others beat me to it. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja murmured. His whole body was covered in golden flames. Like a golden lightning, he rushed into the depths of the deathly, silent forest. Wherever he passed, the golden flames burned to the sky. Many of the weak ghosts and evil spirits that tried to stop him were burned to ashes. They couldn't be more dead. However, not long after he rushed out, a strong air-piercing sound came from his left and right sides. 2 sharp black arrows came from his left and right sides, aiming at the vital parts of Golden Lamp Dharmaraja's body. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja's eyes were cold. He opened his hands to both sides. His palms were burning with golden flames. He suddenly grasped the 2 black arrows in his palms. Sizzle, 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 sizzle. The black arrows shot toward his palms and were instantly burned to ashes by the terrifying golden flames. After the black arrows were destroyed, 2 terrifying and huge black shadows came with unparalleled momentum. They rushed toward Golden Lamp Dharmaraja in the center. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja's law phenomenon expanded again and became 10,000 feet tall. His 2 arms burning with golden flames suddenly opened to both sides and blocked the 2 black shadows. But the impact of the 2 black shadows was so terrifying that Golden Lamp Dharmaraja could not help but groan. His face was slightly pale. 2 more ghosts of the former stage. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja's face was pale. He glanced around and found that the 2 black shadows were no weaker than the ghosts he had just killed. The 2 black shadows were almost identical. They looked like tigers and leopards. Their forehooves stomped on the ground, and they were extremely fast, leaving behind afterimages in the surroundings. Golden Lamp Master snorted coldly as he formed a seal with both hands. The golden flames instantly soared and shrouded the surrounding space. Crash! The 2 Black Panther ghosts immediately stopped and looked at the endless golden flames around them with fear in their eyes. Those who stop me die. Golden Lamp Fawang took a step forward. Rolling golden flames surged out and turned into countless golden flame swords. They came from all directions and landed on the 2 Black Panther ghosts. In the depths, Guan Yihan was panting. He was surrounded by darkness, and countless pairs of scarlet eyes were staring at him strangely. In front of Guan Yihan, there was a huge bear-like ghost that was tens of thousands of feet tall. It stared at Guan Yihan with its lantern-sized red eyes. This bear-like ghost was covered with barb-like thorns all over its body. It looked strange and terrifying. In the process of chasing Zhuowen, he was careless and rushed to the front. He was intercepted and entangled by this former stage ghost. This ghost was very powerful, almost as powerful as him. With the help of the other ghosts around, Guan Yihan was completely at a disadvantage in the battle with this ghost. I have to break through as soon as possible. Guan Yihan hid in the law phenomenon. His eyes were looking around, and his mind was working at a high speed. Suddenly, Guan Yihan's gaze fell to the back. Over there were fewer specters than in other directions. The specters were also relatively weaker. He knew that the back was a good breakthrough point. He could not continue to waste time. If he did not leave now, he might not even be able to leave when he was exhausted. Divine power, Xuyan Si. Thinking of this, Guan Yihan let out a low roar and used her strongest spirit art. An extremely terrifying aura erupted from Guan Yihan's body. Rolling divine power surrounded him like an abyss. With Guan Yihan as the center, the temperature within a radius of several million feet instantly dropped. Waves of cold and gloomy energy transformed into a strange sea of darkness. Whoosh! In the sea of darkness, terrifying waves rose and rushed over with unparalleled force, completely drowning the giant bear ghost in front of him. And it was also at this moment that Guan Yihan took a step forward. The sea of darkness under his feet stirred up a wave and dragged his body backward rapidly. The ghost behind him let out shrill cries. wanting to stop Guan Yihan. Unfortunately, they were all swept away by the waves of the Sea of Darkness and were of no use at all. Soon, a huge gap was cleared behind Guan Yihan. As long as he entered the gap, he would be able to completely escape the encirclement. Thinking of this, Guan Yihan's lips curled into a smug smile. Just as Guan Yihan was about to charge into the gap, a terrifying sonic boom swept over. Guan Yihan's expression changed drastically. He saw a 1,000-foot-long divine sword slashing toward him. Damn it! Guan Yihan roared and formed a seal with both hands. The surrounding black sea stirred up countless waves that appeared in front of him to block the divine sword. But to Guan Yihan's horror, the divine sword cut through the waves like a hot knife through butter and arrived in front of him in an instant. How is this possible? Who is it? Guan Yihan roared and raised the giant sword in front of him. Terrifying sword Qi soared into the sky and swept out in all directions. Clang! The 1,000-meter-long divine sword landed in front of Guan Yihan, heavily colliding with the body of the heavy sword. A clear sword hum rang out, and countless sparks burst out. It looked dazzling and piercingly cold. Guan Yihan's pupils constricted. He felt a terrifying power that he had never felt before pouring into the giant sword in front of him through the divine sword. Guan Yihan groaned, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth as he retreated. At the same time, he looked straight ahead and found that a figure had appeared in the gap. After seeing the figure's true face, Guan Yihan was dumbstruck. His mouth was wide open as he said in disbelief, "It's you, Zhuowen." "It's me." Zhuowen stared coldly at Guan Yihan, the corners of her mouth curling up as she said, "Haven't you always wanted to find me? Now that I've appeared in front of you, why are you so surprised?" Guan Yihan's face was gloomy. Just as he was about to speak, a shocking roar came from behind him. A giant bear ghost leaped out of the sea of Shuyin, splashing out countless waves. Then, it stepped on the waves and came straight for Guan Yihan's vital point. "Damn it! So your goal is this?" Guan Yihan's face was gloomy. He roared and raised the giant sword to block the soul sword intent, but he found that the power of the soul sword intent was still increasing. He couldn't block it at all. Chapter 46:10. Not good. Guan Yihan's expression finally changed greatly. His entire body's strength was suppressed by the soul sword intent, and he was simply unable to divert his attention to block the giant bear's attack behind him. If this continued, he would be killed by the giant bear ghost. "Guan Yihan, you'd better die. This is the consequence of being ungrateful," Zhuowen said coldly. Guan Yihan used all his skills, but he was simply unable to break free from the suppression of the soul sword intent. In the end, he could only watch as the giant bear ghost's giant palm heavily landed on the vital part of his back. Rumble! The giant palm landed, and the flat ground exploded with a terrifying explosion. Then Guan Yihan's enormous lawful embodiment of heaven and earth collapsed inch by inch, finally collapsing into countless specks of light with a loud bang. And Guan Yihan's soul, which was hidden in the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, swept out with a whoosh, quickly fleeing into the distance. "Guan Yihan, you can't escape." Zhuowen had long been on guard against Guan Yihan, so the moment the latter fled, Zhuowen's soul transformed into a giant hand, firmly grabbing Guan Yihan in the hand. "Zhuowen, please spare my life. You and I have no enmity, so there's no need to kill me." Guan Yihan's tiny soul kneeled on the giant's soul hand, kowtowing and begging for mercy to Zhuowen. "If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? Guan Yihan, you must die." Zhuowen glanced indifferently at Guan Yihan's tiny soul, then squeezed his right hand, completely crushing the tiny soul into powder. After killing Guan Yihan, Zhuowen quietly left this place, and scenes similar to Guan Yihan's kept playing out in the following days. Zhuowen constantly passed through the endless ghosts, specifically choosing the middle and early stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth cultivators to attack. He was very clear that it was still somewhat difficult for him to finish off a late-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth expert in a short period of time under such favorable circumstances. Therefore, he planned to take the initiative and get rid of all the weaker experts who were chasing after him. When he faced the remaining embodiment of heaven and earth late-stage experts, he would have a much easier time. While he was traveling, he naturally met the blood-robed king, Golden Lamp Dharmaraja, and a few other experts at the later stage of law phenomenon. However, he did not recklessly charge forward to fight them head-on. Instead, he used the group of ghosts as cover and quietly left, not attracting their attention at all. While Zhuowen was hunting down the experts who were chasing him in the deathly silent forest, Sakyamuni and the ghost child were frantically searching for Zhuowen with the help of the 100 Ghosts portrait. With the 100 Ghosts portrait, the low-level ghosts in the deathly silent forest didn't dare to stop the two of them. After searching around, Sakyamuni and the ghost child still couldn't find any traces of Zhuowen. Instead, they encountered experts like the Blood-Robed King and Golden Lamp Dharmaraja. They didn't go to help the Blood-Robed King and Golden Lamp Dharmaraja. Instead, they continued to move forward, hoping to find Zhuowen. In the deepest part of the deathly silent forest, Sakyamuni and the ghost child stopped on a tree trunk, frowning. "Nephew Shirtion, this Zhuowen is very cunning. We have almost searched through most of the depths of the deathly silent forest, but we still can't find him," the ghost child said with an ugly expression. Sakyamuni's eyes flickered and said, "Senior ghost child, do you still remember those corpses we saw on the way?" The ghost child was stunned and nodded, saying, "Of course I remember. Those should have been killed by the ghosts. After all, they were all mid-level and early-level lawful embodiment of heaven and earth guys. It's normal for them to die when they encounter low-level ghosts." Sakyamuni shook his head, and with a wave of his sleeve, a corpse fell at their feet. This corpse was Guan Yihan's. At this moment, Guan Yihan's corpse was almost unrecognizable, and it was full of wounds. The ghost child looked at the corpse at his feet and said in surprise, "Nephew Shirtion, Guan Yihan's fatal wounds were caused by the ghosts. Do you think the murderer is someone else?" Sakyamuni pointed at the wound on Guan Yihan's chest and said, "Guan Yihan's chest is obviously a sword wound, which means he was attacked by someone else. I'm afraid it was caused by Zhuowen." The ghost child frowned and said, "Nephew Shirtion, you're wrong. Is Zhuowen not afraid of the ghosts? If he really attacked Guan Yihan, he would also be attacked by the ghosts. Are the ghosts only attacking Guan Yihan and ignoring him?" Sakyamuni's eyes flickered and said, "Ghost Child Senior, since we have the 100 Ghosts portrait and can move freely among the ghosts, doesn't Zhuowen have a similar treasure?" The ghost child's pupils shrank, and he couldn't help but look at Sakyamuni and said, "Did he deliberately lead us here?" "Very likely. If he really isn't afraid of the ghosts, then he has the advantage of time and place to enter this place. He can use the power of the ghosts to eliminate the people who are chasing him one by one. What a good plan." Sakyamuni couldn't help but praise. The more the ghost child listened, the more he felt that it made sense, especially when he saw many corpses along the way. Although the early and middle stages of Celestial Phenomenon Realm were weaker than them, it wasn't that easy for them to be killed by the ghosts. In other words, the deaths of these people were most likely caused by Zhuowen behind the scenes. "Nephew Shirtion, if it's really as you predicted, Zhuowen isn't afraid of the ghosts, it will be very difficult for us to find him." The ghost child sighed softly. Sakyamuni was silent for a moment and said indifferently, "If we use ordinary methods, it might not work, but I have a way." The ghost child was startled and looked at Sakyamuni doubtfully. "Ghost Child Senior, the 100 Ghosts portrait is not only used to lead the ghosts and evil spirits. It can also absorb invisible things and refine them to make them completely obedient to the owner of the 100 Ghosts portrait." Sakyamuni said, and his hands formed a seal. A huge black vortex appeared in the 100 Ghosts portrait floating above his head. In an instant, a terrifying suction force appeared in the surroundings, and the wandering ghosts and evil spirits were all sucked into the 100 Ghosts portrait. After the 100 Ghost portrait had absorbed thousands of ghosts, the black vortex gradually disappeared. Sakymuni's hands changed the seal, and he began to control the ghosts that were absorbed by the 100 Ghost portrait. About 4 hours later, the black vortex appeared in the 100 Ghost portrait again. Ghosts rushed out of the black vortex, and they lined up in front of Sakyamuni like soldiers, as if they were ready to listen to Sakyamuni's orders at any time. The 100 Ghost portrait is really powerful. The ghost child's eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the ghosts lined up in front of Sakyamuni. He even found a few of the advanced ghosts among them. A ghost of this level was comparable to an avatar of heaven and earth, and it actually obediently obeyed Sakura's orders. "Go, find this person for me." Sakyamuni waved his sleeves, simulated Zhuowen's aura, and transmitted it to the ghosts in front of him. After sensing the aura released by Sakyamuni, these ghosts with dull eyes suddenly became fierce, as if they had completely changed. Roar, roar, roar. Thousands of ghosts instantly disappeared on the spot and rushed in all directions, frantically searching for Zhuowen's aura. "Oomph. Zhuowen, you're good. You forced me to use the 100 Ghost portrait. You can no longer escape from my grasp." Sakyamuni's eyes were malicious as he muttered in a low voice. Chapter 46:11. In the depths of the deathly silent forest, a middle-aged man unleashed the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth and was engaged in a life-and-death battle with the pre-stage ghost. At the most critical moment, an ear-piercing sound suddenly swept over, shuttling in at a speed that was too fast to cover one's ears. No, the middle-aged man had just reacted when a huge wound burst open on his chest. A huge divine sword that was thousands of feet long had pierced through his lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. A terrifying power erupted. The middle-aged man only had time to let out a blood-curdling scream before the huge lawful embodiment of heaven and earth was torn into pieces. He turned his head with difficulty and barely saw the face of the person who attacked him. His pupils constricted as he shouted, "It's you, Zhuowen." Zhuowen slowly landed not far from the pre-stage ghost. He looked at the middle-aged man coldly and said, "Go in peace." After saying that, Zhuowen pointed his right sword finger across the air. A terrifying soul sword essence broke through the air and instantly shattered the middle-aged man's soul. After killing the middle-aged man, the pre-stage ghost looked at Zhuowen suspiciously. It swallowed the middle-aged man's corpse and quickly left. This person should be the last lawful embodiment of heaven and earth expert. Zhuowen muttered to himself, his eyes emitting a sharp light. During this period, he had used the ghost as a cover to assassinate lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts at the early and middle stages. He had succeeded repeatedly without missing a single one. Finally, he had completely eradicated all the experts below the late stage of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Next, it's Sakyamuni, Golden Lamp Dharmaraja, and Bloody Robe King's turn. Zhuowen's eyes emitted a cold light. He had already thought of eliminating all the people who were chasing after him when he entered the deathly silent forest this time. He was very clear that if these people were not eliminated, he would be heavily obstructed when he wanted to return to the station to use the teleportation array. It would not go smoothly. Taking advantage of these people being separated by him, this was the best time to eliminate them. Zhuowen suddenly frowned slightly. His gaze fell on a pre-stage ghost not far away. This pre-stage ghost was different from the other pre-stage ghosts. It had been staring at him. Pre-stage ghosts did not have any spiritual intelligence at all. Their main action was to constantly sway until they finally swayed. Only when a living creature appeared would the ghosts attack it in a frenzy and devour it. But when it came to its own kind, the specter would not show any interest, much less stare at its own kind. The aura on Zhuowen's body was the same as that of the previous level ghosts. Ordinary ghosts would avoid him and not stare at him without blinking. Thinking of this, Zhuowen grabbed at the air with his right hand. Surging divine power gushed out, condensing into a huge palm that grabbed at the strange ghost. To Zhuowen's surprise, the ghost actually revealed a look of fear. It hurriedly dodged and quickly fled. There's something wrong with this ghost. A cold light flashed in Juan's eyes. Without thinking, he chased after the ghost and grabbed it with his palm. He saw the ghost hiding in his palm. Finally, when it saw that there was nowhere to hide, its eyes flickered and it revealed a look of fear. But soon, the ghost's scarlet eyes became sluggish. Juan, I finally found you. You can't escape. What caused Juan to be surprised was that a vast and mighty voice actually sounded out from within Gue Mei's body. Sakyamuni? Juan's eyes became cold. He was too familiar with this voice. It was Sakyamuni. Boom! At the same time, the ghost caught in Juan's palm suddenly exploded and turned into a black vortex. A terrifying power came out of the black vortex and was rapidly surging out. Without thinking, Juan threw away the black vortex in his hand. At the same time, he released a soul sword essence and fiercely slashed into the depths of the black vortex. But to his surprise, after the soul sword essence entered the black vortex, it did not cause the slightest ripple. Humph! Juan snorted coldly. A purple gold light surged between his eyebrows and instantly condensed into several soul sword essences. They swept out and blasted into the black vortex. But to his dismay, the black vortex was not destroyed by the soul sword essences. Instead, it expanded bigger and bigger. Juan, it's useless. This teleportation vortex is supported by the power of the 100 Ghosts portrait. You can't destroy it. Sakyamuni's mocking laughter came from the depths of the black vortex. He was not worried at all that Juan could destroy the teleportation vortex. After all, the teleportation vortex was formed by all the ghosts in the 100 Ghosts portrait. With so many ghosts, even Sakyamuni himself might not be able to destroy it in a short time, let alone Juan. 100 Ghosts portrait? It seems to be a teleportation vortex formed by the ghost's power. Juan sneered. He stretched out his right palm and landed it on the expanding black vortex. Then, he activated the primordial technique. Immediately, the expanding black vortex came to a stop. Then it stopped expanding and began to gradually shrink. How is this possible? The power of the teleportation vortex is weakening? Juan, what did you do? Sakyamuni's shocked and angry voice came from the vortex. Juan sneered and ignored Sakyamuni's angry roar. Instead, he activated the primordial technique at high speed. The black vortex shrunk rapidly. When it shrunk to about half a meter, a terrifying power blasted out from it. It was a huge golden palm that landed heavily on Juan's body. Juan's gaze turned cold, but he did not dodge. Instead, endless black, demonic chi surged out of his body. At this moment, he entered the state of demonic chi. At the same time, scarlet flames danced in the depths of his eyes and shot out in an instant. The strange blood-red flames surged out and collided heavily with the golden palm. Shockingly, the blood-red flames and the golden palm collided and dissipated. They were actually evenly matched. What? Your power? Within the black vortex, Sakyamuni's voice was full of shock. Juan's gaze was cold as he sped up the primordial technique. The black vortex in front of his right hand instantly shrank into a black dot. The moment it became a black dot, Sakyamuni and the ghost child were about to reach the exit. They exchanged glances with Juan. Finally, the vortex disappeared and they were locked in the teleportation channel. Damn it! In the teleportation channel, the ghost child saw the exit close and cursed with an ugly expression. This kid is too strange. He seems to have the power to restrain ghosts. This power is very similar to the exorcism power of the exorcist family. Sakyamuni lowered his head and pondered. The ghost child shook his head and said, although the exorcist family has all kinds of exorcism powers, they are far from as strong as this kid. To be able to restrain the countless ghosts in the 100 Ghosts portrait in an instant, this is much more terrifying than all the descendants of the exorcist family. At this point, the ghost child looked at Sakyamuni and asked, Nephew Shirtion, what should we do next? Sakyamuni sneered and said, "Don't worry. The ghosts I released were not just one, but thousands. That Zhuowen can't escape from my grasp." Chapter 46:12. Sakyamuni really can't be underestimated. I didn't expect the 100 Ghosts portrait to have such a function. Zhuowen kept jumping from tree to tree, his eyes filled with fear. Xiao He followed closely behind Zhuowen and said, "Kid, with your current strength, you shouldn't be afraid of Naughty Shiva, right? Why did you stop Naughty Shiva and Ghost Child from coming out?" Zhuowen's eyes flickered. "I don't know why, but I keep feeling that there's an extremely obscure aura on Naughty Shiva. That aura gave me a very strong sense of danger. In my opinion, Sakyamuni is a bigger threat than Golden Lamp Dharmaraja, and by a lot." "What?" Xiao He was shocked. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja was the strongest among this group of experts, stronger than the average expert at the later stage of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. In Xiao He's opinion, even if Sakyamuni was extremely talented and powerful, he shouldn't be stronger than Golden Lamp Dharmaraja. He didn't expect Zhuowen to have such a high opinion of Sakyamuni. "In short, I don't want to meet Sakyamuni so early." Zhuowen spoke his mind. Xiao He nodded and continued, "But you have to be careful of the 100 Ghosts portrait on that guy. He can't control only one ghost." Zhuowen frowned. After Xiao He's reminder, he felt that it was indeed quite troublesome. If Sakyamuni controlled a large number of ghosts and scattered them in various places, he would be immediately discovered wherever he went, and then Sakyamuni would rush over through the teleportation vortex. "It seems that I can only move the venue." Zhuowen's eyes flickered. While he was still in midair, he turned into invisible water and merged into the depths of the black soil. After a while, Zhuowen, who had transformed into an invisible water, appeared outside the deathly, silent forest. After he reformed his body, he took out the chariot of chariots and disappeared from the spot with a whoosh. This time, Zhuowen raised the speed of the chariot to the limit. In less than 15 minutes, he appeared at the border of the Outer Realm battlefield. On the other side of the border was the boundless starry sky. After Zhuowen opened the border barrier, he found an incomparably huge fragment of a continent in the starry sky and set up several temporary teleportation arrays on this fragment. After he set up the temporary teleportation formation, Zhuowen ascended the chariot once more, and then he transformed into a flowing light that returned to the Outer Realm battlefield. When he arrived at the deathly silent forest once more, he swiftly put away the chariot of chariot and once again transformed into formless water as he headed towards the depths of the deathly silent forest. Soon, he found the location of the blood-robed king, Shuefeng. In the deathly silent forest, the experts who were chasing after him were basically all slaughtered by him. Now, there were only 4 people left. They were Sakyamuni, Golden Lamp Master, Blood-Robe King, Ice Ghost King, and Ghost Child. These 4 people all had the strength of the late-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, and they were not easy to deal with. The weakest among them was actually the Ghost Child. However, the Ghost Child was with Sakyamuni, so Zhuowen gave up on taking the initiative to look for the Ghost Child. The second was the Blood-Robe King, Shuefeng. Therefore, Zhuowen set his target on the Blood-Robe King, Shuefeng. The formless water that Zhuowen had transformed into quickly found the location of the Blood-Robe King, Shuefeng. At this moment, the Blood-Robe King had barely managed to get rid of the ghosts in front of him, and his figure was slightly battered. "Zhuowen, you be **starred. When I catch you, I'll make you suffer a fate worse than death." The Blood-Robed King waved his hand and destroyed the ghosts that had gathered around him. He then roared with a face full of anger. "Oh, how are you going to make me suffer a fate worse than death?" An indifferent voice sounded faintly and immediately attracted the Blood-Robed King's attention. The Blood-Robed King turned around abruptly. The moment he saw the figure standing behind him, his pupils could not help but shrink. "Zhuowen? Ha ha ha! I really didn't expect that you would dare to appear in front of me. Are you courting death?" The Blood-Robed King laughed loudly, and a fierce killing intent burst out from the depths of his eyes. He took a step forward and swept towards Zhuowen like a sharp arrow. Zhuowen stood with his hands behind his back, looking indifferently at the blood-robed king who was getting closer and closer. He did not panic at all. Bang! The blood-robed king's palm landed heavily on Zhuowen's body, and then Zhuowen was sent flying, crashing into several giant trees. The blood-robed king immediately sensed that something was wrong. He felt that there was something strange about this Zhuowen in front of him. Blood-robed king, your eyeballs aren't very good. That's not the real me. Suddenly, a formless water appeared under the blood-robed king's feet, forming a palm and placing a disc array under the blood-robed king's feet. This is... The blood-robed king's pupils shrank, and he hurriedly retreated, but it was too late. The disc array emitted a blazing light, instantly enveloping the blood-robed king and teleporting him away. The formless water seeped out of the ground, revealing Zhuowen's figure. He waved his right hand, and the substitute that had been sent flying by the blood-robed king turned into a golden-armored divine general and respectfully landed in front of Zhuowen. The golden-armored divine general was originally a puppet, so it was not affected by the blood-robed king's blow. Its chest had cracked open. As long as the puppet's central energy was not destroyed, the golden-armored divine general could continue to fight. When Zhuowen took out the temporary teleportation disc array, he saw several ghosts in the distance. He glanced at these ghosts, and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He whispered, "Sakyamuni, don't waste your time. If I want to leave, you can't stop me." After saying that, Zhuowen activated the teleportation disc array and instantly disappeared in the white light. However, before leaving, Zhuowen left behind the golden armor divine general who had disguised himself as Zhuowen. Not long after Zhuowen left, the ghost turned into a huge black vortex. Two figures walked out of the black vortex. They were Sakyamuni and the ghost child. The two of them immediately saw Zhuowen's figure standing on a tree trunk not far away. "Zhuowen, you can't escape." Sakyamuni coldly snorted and like a golden lightning rushed toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen sneered, imitating Zhuowen's tone before he left, and said, "Sakyamuni, don't waste your time. If I want to leave, you can't stop me." After saying that, Zhuowen activated the temporary teleportation disc array nearby and disappeared before Sakyamuni's eyes. After entering the depths of the dead silent forest, the golden armor divine general had set up many temporary teleportation discs in various places, just in case. Now, the teleportation discs and the golden armor divine general had come in handy in restraining Sakyamuni and the others. While Sakyamuni's attention was attracted by the fake Zhuowen, the real Zhuowen had already arrived at an abandoned continent fragment in the extraterritorial starry sky through the teleportation disc array. At the edge of the continent fragment, the blood-robed king Xue Feng looked around gloomily. He finally confirmed that he had been teleported to the extraterritorial starry sky. "Bastard, look at what you've done. You deliberately teleported me outside, didn't you?" Xue Feng said with a gloomy face. Xue Feng was curious. How did Zhuowen set up the teleportation disc array in the extraterritorial starry sky? One should know that there was a strong barrier between the extraterritorial battlefield and the extraterritorial starry sky. Ordinary cultivators were not qualified to open the barrier and enter the extraterritorial starry sky. However, Zhuowen did it, and even teleported him to the extraterritorial starry sky. Of course, Zhuowen could do all this because he knew the method to open the barrier from the owner of the ruin, Tan Penghong's inherited memory. Chapter 46:13. Blood-Robe King, Xue Feng. You might not know that there are only 4 people who are chasing after me. You are one of them. Zhuowen stood in front of Xue Feng. He wasn't in a hurry to make a move, but looked straight at Xue Feng and said calmly. Xue Feng's eyes shrank, and he stared at Zhuowen. He smiled and said, "Zhuowen, I admit that you have a lot of tricks up your sleeves. However, you might not know how many lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts are chasing after you this time, right? Do you think that you can scare me with this?" Zhuowen said sarcastically, "Scare you? What good is that for me? There are a total of 37 people who are chasing after me this time, and I killed 33 of them with my own hands. Now, you are the 34th person." Hearing that, Xuefeng was completely silent. Zhuan was right. There were indeed 37 people who were chasing after Zhuan this time. Could it be that what he said was true? That he really killed 34 of the 37 experts with his own hands? Those were 34 lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts. They were the real experts who stood at the peak of the 100 regions outside the world and were the elites of the 9 super regions. Among them, there was no lack of cultivators from the Bloodthorn region. If they were to die in Zhuan's hands, the 9 super regions would suffer a great loss. This is impossible. Zhuan, do you think that by saying such words, you can mess with my mind? You are really delusional. Xuefeng harumphed coldly and took a step forward with his right foot. A terrifying aura surged out like the sea. The vast divine power spread across the entire fragment of the continent. Due to the strong power, the entire continent shook violently, and countless cracks appeared. Xuefeng's body grew taller by 10 feet, 10,000 feet, 10,000 feet, 1 million feet, 1 million feet. The moment he reached a height of 1,000,000 meters, his presence reached an extremely terrifying level. The huge fragment of the continent beneath his feet directly collapsed, turning into countless pieces of rock. Zhuan landed on a piece of rock. The surging divine power protected his body and blocked the countless rocks that were flying toward him. Xuefeng's lawful embodiment of heaven and earth was a human figure that was covered in a crimson robe. The huge crimson-robed human figure held a crimson scepter in his right hand and a ball that was formed by countless crimson threads in his left hand. His entire body was filled with a strong, majestic aura. However, Zhuan could feel that Xuefeng's aura wasn't stable. It was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries after the battle with Ghost in the dead silent forest. "Zhuan, the biggest mistake you've made in your life was to send me here alone. Do you think that you are my match if you fight me one-on-one?" Xuefeng's huge body looked down at Zhuan, who was on top of the broken rock. The corners of his mouth were filled with disdain and contempt. "Now, I'll show you how strong I am and how weak you are." Xuefeng set his hands SSS. A blood-red bolt of lightning that was over 100 m thick suddenly flashed out from within the blood-red scepter, and it tore through the starry sky as it struck towards the young man that stood on the shattered rocks ahead. Zhuan took a deep breath and instantly entered the demonic state. Then, he pointed the sword finger of his right hand at his glabella. Crash! Terrifying soul power surged out, condensing into a huge black sword in front of him. Under the state of demonic corruption, the purple-gold color of the soul sword intent was completely infected by the demonic chi. Its color was completely dyed black, and its aura became extremely terrifying. Zhuan grabbed at the air with his right hand, and a terrifying storm of sword chi suddenly burst forth from the 30,000-meter-long divine sword. It swept around Zhuan, and countless rocks were annihilated into powder. Slash! Zhuan shouted and slashed out with his right hand. The huge divine sword followed his hand gesture, and a terrifying gale swept out, colliding heavily with the blood-red lightning. Rip! In an instant, time seemed to have stopped, and it flowed extremely slowly. However, the phenomenon of time stopping didn't last for long. Then, Xuefeng was shocked to find that the blood-red lightning he wielded was actually slashed apart by the huge divine sword. The countless rocks that were floating around Zhuan couldn't withstand the terrifying shockwave from the collision between the two of them in an instant, and they were all shattered into powder. Slash again. After slashing apart the blood-red lightning, Zhuan took a step in the air and appeared not far away from Xuefeng. Zhuan raised the sword finger of his right hand high above his head and looked down at Xuefeng. Then, he swung his hand down heavily. The massive divine sword slashed down from the sky, and a series of terrifying explosions erupted around the starry sky, forming a series of terrifying black hole vortexes. This guy's soul is actually so powerful. I'm afraid he has already reached the later stage of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, or even stronger. Feng's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He could feel that the black divine sword was formed purely by Zhuowen's soul power. Its power was extraordinary, and it actually made him tremble. D***M*, it's just an ant from defying ancient starlight. Feng roared and raised his blood-red scepter high. In an instant, there were countless blood-red lightning bursting out from the blood-red scepter, and every lightning was a few hundred feet thick. With Feng as the center, the area within a radius of a few billion kilometers was filled with blood-red lightning, as though it was an ocean of blood-red lightning. The blood-red lightning began to condense and combine, and in the end, it formed an unprecedentedly huge blood-red lightning dragon. Roar! The blood-red lightning dragon roared and soared into the sky, pouncing on the black divine sword that was slashing down. Rumble! The blood-red lightning dragon and the black divine sword collided heavily, and there was an explosion of boundless radiance. The surrounding rocks and land that floated by were all crushed into powder. Zhuowen stood in midair, and his eyes narrowed. He thought to himself that Feng was indeed an expert at the later stage of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The power of the attack was really powerful. Even the huge divine soul sword essence in the state of Mo Ran was at a disadvantage. Break it! Feng saw that the huge divine sword was at a disadvantage, and there was a cold smile at the corner of his lips. Then, he roared, and the blood-red lightning dragon in midair let out an earth-shattering roar, and its aura was instantly raised to the extreme. The huge divine sword was pushed back continuously, and there were even more intense explosions in the surrounding starry sky. Little bastard, you're dead. Feng's eyes were bloodshot, and he leaped up. His huge body landed on the huge blood-red lightning dragon. At that moment, the blood-red lightning dragon seemed to have the help of God. No matter if it was its aura or size, it instantly increased by a few times, and it completely suppressed the huge divine sword. Zhuowen was still hovering in midair, and he looked down at the blood-red lightning dragon that was approaching him continuously, as well as the huge divine sword that was being pushed up continuously by the blood-red lightning dragon. Feng, you underestimate me, Zhuowen said slowly, and there was a blazing blood-red flame in the depth of his eyes. Chapter 46:14. Billowing demon flames gushed out like sparks that could set a prairie ablaze. They instantly flew out and attached themselves to the holy sword. Suddenly, the holy sword's body expanded again. It grew from 100,000 feet to 100,000 feet, and a terrifying aura crushed the surrounding space like a rainstorm. In an instant, the crimson lightning dragon was completely suppressed by the holy sword, and it didn't dare to fly up. Slash! Zhuowen's eyes grew redder. He raised his right hand above his head and swung it down. The holy sword that was 100,000 feet long unleashed an unprecedented terrifying power and slashed the crimson lightning dragon. Rip! The shocking thing was that the huge crimson lightning dragon was slashed into two by the slash. Countless crimson lightning surged in all directions like a tornado. How was this possible? My superpower, Crimson Dragon splits the sky, was destroyed? Feng couldn't help but fly out from the terrifying shockwave. He looked at the crimson lightning dragon that was cut into two in terror. This was the strongest superpower that he had that was second only to Bloody Hellblade. It was destroyed just like that. Was Zhuowen really that strong? Suddenly, such a question popped up in Feng's mind. Slash again. Zhuowen was still hovering in midair. The sword finger on his right hand pressed down abruptly. The terrifying, huge divine sword descended once again, pointing directly at Feng. The slash was too terrifying. Everywhere it passed, the starry sky exploded, and numerous black holes that were like rings were formed. Feng felt an unprecedented threat of death from a slash. He knew clearly that if he couldn't block the slash, he would definitely die. Superpower, Bloody Hellblade. Feng's eyes became crazy. If one were to look closely, one could see that Feng's eyes were completely covered in crimson. On the surface of Xue Feng's huge celestial phenomenon, there was a terrifying crimson chi that surged out. The crimson chi seemed to be material as it surged out and condensed above Xue Feng's head. If one were to look closely, the crimson chi condensed into a crimson saber. As the blood chi continued to gush out and condense, the blood-red saber grew larger and larger, and its aura became more and more terrifying. The Bloody Hell Wild Saber was Xue Feng's strongest divine ability. He sacrificed his blood, essence, and soul to condense an indomitable and terrifying divine saber. Back then, when Xue Feng was still in the early stage of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, he had used this mystique to kill someone in the middle stage of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Ever since he ascended the throne of the Bloodthorn domain, Xue Feng had not used this move for a very long time. This was because he was already invincible in the Bloodthorn domain. No one could force him to use this move. But this time, a mere defying ancient Starlight Realm ant had actually forced him to use this move. This filled Xue Feng's heart with shame. The intense anger made Xue Feng want to kill Zhuan immediately. Rumble. When the Bloody Hell Wild Saber was fully formed, the saber body was 50,000 feet long. Streaks of blood-red saber chi lingered around the saber body, adding a mysterious and powerful aura to the saber. Zhuan's pupils shrank. He felt a strong sense of threat from the Bloody Hell Wild Saber. There was no doubt that the Bloody Hell Wild Saber was too powerful. His divine soul sword intent may not be able to withstand it. Rumble. Just when Zhuan was shocked by the power of the Bloody Hell Wild Saber, Xue Feng had already made his move. He flicked his right hand across the air, and the 50,000 feet Bloody Hell Wild Saber broke through the air, rushing into the sky at lightning speed. The speed of the Bloody Hell Wild Saber was too fast. In the blink of an eye, it appeared below the divine soul sword intent and heavily collided with it. Bang, bang, bang. The saber and sword collided, erupting into a terrifying aftershock. The entire starry sky was affected by this aftershock and trembled violently as if it was about to collapse. The Bloody Hell Wild Saber and the divine soul sword intent constantly bombarded each other. In the starry sky, there were bursts of sounds of metal clashing, as well as the sound of the starry sky collapsing. Suddenly, Zhuan's face changed slightly. In the starry sky, the divine soul sword intent that was tens of thousands of feet long was forced back by the Bloody Hell Wild Saber. The sword body that was burning with billowing crimson flames was bombarded until it was full of bumps and hollows. The entire sword body became dim, and its aura withered. Bloody Hell Cross slash! Xue Feng roared, and his sword fingers drew a cross in the air. The Bloody Hell Wild Saber slashed out a cross in the starry sky, and it blasted on the divine soul sword intent. Finally, the divine soul sword intent that was tens of thousands of feet long finally couldn't withstand this blow, and it collapsed inch by inch. Zhuan, you can force me to use this move, which proves that you are indeed very powerful. However, no matter how powerful you are, you can't possibly be my opponent. Die. Xue Feng's cold voice rolled in the starry sky. He no longer looked down on Zhuan like before. After witnessing Zhuan's strength, Xue Feng also began to treat Zhuan as a real opponent, and his attacks were even more ruthless and merciless. Zhuan looked calm, as if he didn't see the Bloody Hell Wild Saber that was getting closer and closer. Are you scared out of your wits? Xue Feng saw Zhuan in a daze above the starry sky, and the corners of his mouth curled into a mocking smile as he secretly sneered. Swoosh! Swoosh! The Bloody Hell Wild Saber's speed was too fast. It broke through the starry sky, and in an instant, it swept in front of Zhuan. The violent saber chi swept over, causing Zhuan's body to move without wind, and his robes fluttered loudly. Blood-robed king, it's time for me to let you see the true power of my divine soul. Zhuan took a step forward, and the sword fingers on his right hand touched between his eyebrows. Then, An even more terrifying divine soul power burst out. In the starry sky, countless spiritual powers formed an incomparably huge handprint. It was the Shintian handprint that Zhuowen had learned from the ferryman's memory. There is no doubt that the Shintian handprint was a divine soul superpower that was far more powerful than the divine soul sword essence. Hence, its power was naturally far more powerful than the divine soul sword essence. The Shintian handprint was 100,000 feet long. When it blasted out, it actually caught the bloody hell wild saber in the palm of its hand. What? This lad actually has such a powerful divine soul superpower? Xuefeng's heart was beating extremely fast, and he said in shock, "Break!" Zhuowen said softly, and his right palm suddenly squeezed. The huge Shintian handprint also squeezed hard along with Zhuowen's action. The arrogant and overbearing bloody hell wild saber shattered into pieces under Xuefeng's dumbfounded gaze. Xuefeng died. At the moment when the bloody hell wild saber was crushed, Zhuowen's power didn't diminish. His right palm slapped out again, and it slammed heavily towards Xuefeng. D***. How can he be so strong? That's impossible. Xuefeng dodged the attack of the Shintian handprint in a sorry state, and his heart was finally filled with fear. "You can't escape." Zhuowen's indifferent voice rang out once again, and the great Shintian palm imprint continued to smash down on Xuefeng. Countless meteorites in the starry sky were crushed into dust, and black holes appeared one after another in space. Xuefeng could only dodge passively, and he didn't have any power to fight back at all. Even his strongest divine soul superpower, bloody hell wild saber, was crushed by the Shintian handprint. If he dared to resist the Shintian handprint with his mere physical body, wasn't he courting death? Chapter 46:15. Bang, bang, bang. In the starry sky, there was a huge handprint that kept hitting the starry sky. It left a terrifying and deep gully in the starry sky, like a dense spider web that spread deep into the starry sky. A figure in a sorry state could only dodge under the attack of the handprint. The figure was none other than Xuefeng. At that moment, Xuefeng's hair was disheveled and his clothes were ragged. He turned into a blood shadow and dodged the attack of the great dark heaven handprint. His speed was extremely fast, but the great dark heaven handprint wasn't slow either. It followed his footsteps closely and didn't give him any chance to catch his breath. Superpower, Bloody Hellblade. Xuefeng roared and performed the Bloody Hellblade again. He slashed out 3 times at once. Xuefeng's face became even paler. The million-foot celestial body shrunk to only 100,000 feet in size. The execution of the bloody hell wild saber required the absorption of blood essence to condense. Xuefeng had used a lot of blood essence to use at once. Now, he used it again and released 3 times at once. In an instant, 70% of the blood essence in his body was sucked dry. Even the 1,000-meter-long celestial phenomenon had been forcefully sucked dry by him until it had shrunk to a size of over 30 meters. Exterminate! Xuefeng was like a mad demon as he roared. Losing to Zhuowen, who only had reverse ancient starlight, was the greatest humiliation in his life. He couldn't lose. Otherwise, he would never be able to lift his head in the 9 super regions. The 3 bloody hell blades broke through the starry sky and stood on the great dark heaven handprint. The great dark sky palm print, which was like a hot knife through butter, actually stopped the moment it collided with the bloody hell blade. Then, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the great dark heaven handprint, and it collapsed. 2 of the 3 bloody hell blades were broken. Although the remaining bloody hell blade was dim, it didn't lose its momentum and continued to charge toward Zhuowen. "Ha, little bastard, the final victory still belongs to me. Although your handprint is powerful, it was still destroyed by me. Now, you can just close your eyes and wait for death." Xuefeng laughed out loud when he saw the great dark sky hand seal being destroyed. The depths of his eyes finally relaxed a lot. He knew that so long as he destroyed the grand dark heaven palm, Then Zhuowen would be helpless against him and could only die at his hands in the end. Zhuowen's gaze was calm. He continued to hover in the starry sky. Countless shattered rocks surrounded him, forming a ring of light. Whoosh! The infernal manic saber was too fast. It arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. It broke through the halo formed by the gravel and went straight for Zhuowen's forehead. In that instant, Zhuowen moved. He gently raised his right hand, and the purple-gold light between his eyebrows burst out again. This time, the spiritual energy he released was even more powerful. Under the support of Mo Ran, it turned ink-black. In an instant, 3 giant handprints made of rolling black fog appeared in the void behind Zhuowen. You can still perform such a powerful spiritual energy superpower, and there are 3 of them. When Xue Feng saw the 3 great dark sky hand seals behind Zhuowen, he was dumbfounded. An unprecedented fear rose in his heart. He had to use all his strength and expend a large amount of blood essence to barely break a great dark sky hand seal. At that moment, Zhuowen released 3 great dark sky hand seals at once. He understood that he was no match for Zhuowen. No, I don't want to die here. An intense feeling of fear instantly filled Xue Feng's mind. He shouted loudly and actually turned around to escape. Xue Feng, you can't escape. Zhuowen slowly extended his right hand and pressed down on the void. The 3 great dark sky hand seals slammed down and instantly turned the infernal manic saber into dust. Then, the 3 great dark sky hand seals chased after Xue Feng mercilessly at an extremely fast speed. Xue Feng tried his best to escape with a hideous face. The fear of death shrouded his heart, making him want to run for his life. Just as he was about to reach the barrier at the border of the extraterritorial battlefield, there was a terrifying, air-rending sound behind him. Then, he realized that the starry sky around him suddenly shattered and collapsed, forming dense black cracks one after another. When he turned around, he was shocked to see that there were 3 huge, great dark sky hand seals coming at him and slamming heavily on his body. No! There was a shrill scream. Xue Feng's celestial body collapsed into dust under the attack of the 3 great dark sky hand seals. Zhuowen walked over slowly. The great dark sky hand seal was an extremely high-level spiritual energy superpower. Even one spiritual energy couldn't survive after being crushed by it. However, just as Zhuo Wengang was about to descend near Xue Feng's corpse to plunder the world left behind by the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, a terrifying spiritual energy suddenly rushed towards him and rushed into his forehead. Zhuowen didn't notice, and the spiritual energy invaded his spiritual sea in his glabella. Ha ha! Zhuowen, you didn't expect me to still be alive, did you? You might not know that I, Xue Feng, am most powerful not in my physical superpower, but in my spiritual energy superpower. My attainments in spiritual energy are far above all the kings in the super regions. Among them, my attainments in possession are the deepest. Even if it's someone in the later stage of the celestial body of Earth, I can easily possession, let alone you. In the depths of Zhuowen's spiritual energy, the blood-robed king's savage and wanton laughter rang. In Xue Feng's opinion, Zhuowen's spiritual energy was only at the later stage of the celestial body of Earth. The reason why he could have such powerful combat power was mainly because of the great dark sky hand seal. His physical body had collapsed. As long as he possessed Zhuowen, he would be able to inherit all the secret skills on Zhuowen's body and all the resources in the relic. I'll gladly take everything you have. Xue Feng's proud laughter echoed in the depths of Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen was stunned at first, but he soon calmed down. There was even a mocking smile at the corner of his mouth. Possession? The thing that Zhuowen was least afraid of was possession. Not to mention Xue Feng. Even if it was an expert who was stronger than Xue Feng, possession would be the same as seeking death. Reckless bastard, Zhuowen muttered softly. He then mobilized the 2 primordial stones in the depths of his spiritual energy. Suddenly, his spiritual energy sea was enveloped by a mysterious purple light, driving away any abnormal things in his spiritual energy. What kind of power is this? Why is there such a terrifying thing in your spiritual energy? Ah, no. The moment the primordial stones lit up, Xue Feng let out a shrill scream. However, the scream didn't last for long before it completely disappeared. Zhuan understood that Xue Feng had been completely purified by the power of the primordial stones and became nutrients in his spiritual energy. What a surging spiritual energy! Zhuan's eyes lit up. He immediately sat cross-legged on a cliff at the border and began to concentrate on refining Xue Feng's spiritual energy. Xue Feng's spiritual energy attainment was indeed higher than most experts at the later stage of the celestial body of Earth. However, he lacked a powerful spiritual energy. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so easy for Zhuan to deal with Xue Feng. He might even be in danger. Chapter 46:16. If I can completely refine Xue Feng's spiritual energy, my spiritual energy will improve further and reach the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Zhuan's eyes shone brightly. Xue Feng's possession of his body was a pleasant surprise for him. If Xue Feng had not possessed him, Zhuan would have only killed Xue Feng and taken his resources. But now, Xue Feng did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. He even wanted to give his spiritual energy to him for free. If my spiritual energy can reach the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, even if the naughty Shiva has a great trump card, I won't have to be afraid of him. Zhuan's eyes shone brightly. He knew that if his spiritual energy could become stronger, he would have more confidence in defeating Golden Lampha Wang, Sakyamuni, and Ghost Child. Zhuan sat cross-legged in the depths of the extraterritorial starry sky, concentrating on refining Xue Feng's spiritual energy. In the depths of the deathly silent forest, Sakyamuni and Ghost Child were still tracking Zhuan. Every time they caught sight of Zhuan, the latter would immediately teleport away, using a preset temporary teleportation formation. What is this Zhuan trying to do? Since he doesn't want to meet us directly, why doesn't he use a temporary teleportation formation to leave? Instead, he's strolling in the depths of the deathly silent forest. Ghost Child frowned as he found it strange. Sakyamuni was also puzzled. He said in a low voice, "This kid's temporary teleportation formation should be almost used up. Once it's used up, this kid will definitely die. Continue the chase." Sakyamuni and Ghost Child tracked Zhuan for a while, and finally found out that Zhuan had used up the last teleportation formation disc and stopped on the trunk of a giant tree. Not far from Zhuan, a black vortex appeared. Sakyamuni and Ghost Child rushed out at an extremely fast speed and swept toward Zhuan. "Zhuan, you can't escape this time." The Ghost Child grinned and clawed at the air with his right hand. The surrounding temperature plummeted, condensing into countless ice crystals, which then transformed into a blue frost hand that grabbed onto Zhuan. Zhuan struggled for a moment, but he couldn't break free. The Ghost Child grabbed him in front. Sakyamuni's face suddenly turned cold. He kicked Zhuan to the ground, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. "This isn't the real Zhuan. It's fake. Puppets again? What was this guy trying to do? Are you trying to fool us?" Sakyamuni was furious. He had chased after Zhuan for so long, only to end up with a fake puppet. The Ghost Child let go of Zhuan, who was transformed by the Golden Armor General. Then he slammed his hand down, and a terrifying power exploded. The Golden Armor General was blasted to smithereens. "Nephew Shirtian, what should we do now?" The Ghost Child's face was not looking good. Sakyamuni fell into silence. To be honest, he didn't know what to do next. Now, they had completely lost track of Zhuan's whereabouts and clues. The two of them had become headless flies with no way to find him. "We can only return to the station first. Continue to send people to search for Zhuan," Sakyamuni said helplessly. When the two of them walked out of the depths of the deathly silent forest, they happened to meet Dharmaraja Golden Lamp in the periphery. At this moment, Dharmaraja Golden Lamp was in a rather sorry state. He was travel-worn, and his face was not looking good. He had been tracking Zhuowen in the depths of the deathly silent forest. Unfortunately, he had encountered a lot of advanced level ghosts, which were almost endless. This caused him to spend almost all of his time resisting the advanced level ghosts. In the end, Dharmaraja Golden Lamp could not stand anymore. He had to retreat from the depths of the deathly silent forest and return to the periphery. Ghost Child, Sakyamuni, have you found Zhuowen? When Dharmaraja Golden Lamp saw the two of them come out, he hurriedly greeted them and asked. But soon, he found that the Ghost Child and Sakyamuni were untouched, and there were no traces of a fierce battle. This made him somewhat puzzled. The Ghost Child shook his head and said, "We have found him, but that Zhuowen is too cunning. The one he released in the deathly silent forest was not his real body, but a puppet." With that, the Ghost Child threw the broken puppet fragments on the ground. Dharmaraja Golden Lamp took a closer look and saw Zhuowen's silhouette in the fragments. Dharmaraja Golden Lamp took a deep look at Sakyamuni and the Ghost Child, but didn't say much. Instead, he asked, "What about the others? Since that Zhuowen's real body is not in the depths of the deathly silent forest, we should inform the others and let them come out." The Ghost Child said hesitantly, "Nephew Shirtion and I saw many corpses in the depths of the deathly silent forest. We investigated the cause of death of these corpses, and they were all killed by others. We suspect that it was Zhuowen's real body that did it." Dharmaraja Golden Lamp's pupils shrank slightly, and he said somewhat strangely, "Didn't you say that Zhuowen's real body was not in there? Now you're saying that his real body killed the others. Now he shouldn't be in there, because most of the people who besieged him were killed by him. The only ones who are lucky enough to survive are the few of us who have the strength of the late stage of law phenomenon," Sakyamuni said in a deep voice. Dharmaraja Golden Lamp was shocked. Those were dozens of law phenomenon experts. So many law phenomenon experts had died in the hands of Zhuowen in the deathly silent forest. This would thoroughly shake the 9 great domains and cause a great uproar. The blood-robed king should still be in there. I'll send him a message and ask him to come out. Dharmaraja Golden Lamp took a deep breath, took out a communication jade charm, and sent a message to the blood-robed king. The Ghost Child and Sakyamuni waited in silence. Soon, Dharmaraja Golden Lamp received the message from the blood-robed king. He opened the communication jade charm, and his expression changed completely. "What's wrong?" The Ghost Child and Sakyamuni walked forward and saw the content on the communication jade charm. Their pupils shrank slightly. It said the blood-robed king is dead. "You next. Zhuowen. How is this possible? The blood-robed king was killed by this guy? That's impossible." The Ghost Child screamed. No matter how strong Zhuowen was, it was impossible for him to be strong enough to kill a law phenomenon expert at the late stage. This was far beyond the Ghost Child and Dharmaraja Golden Lamp's imagination. Even Sakyamuni's face was completely gloomy. He also felt that it was inconceivable. However, they had to believe that the blood-robed king had kept the communication jade charm close to his body and would not have easily given it to others. Since Zhuowen had obtained the communication jade charm of the blood-robed king, it also meant that Zhuowen had indeed killed the blood-robed king and obtained all the resources and items on his body. Sakyamuni, the Ghost Child, and Dharmaraja Golden Lamp looked up at each other at the same time. They all realized that the blood-robed king was really dead, and he had been killed by Zhuowen. "Let's go. Let's return to the station. We need to discuss this matter at length," Sakyamuni said in a low voice. "We must kill this guy. He's too big a threat," the Ghost Child said gloomily. Dharmaraja Golden Lamp's face was gloomy, and he did not say a word. However, from his clenched fists, it could be seen that he was also very restless. Chapter 46:17. In the depths of the extraterritorial starry sky, Zhuowen sat cross-legged at the core of a fragment continent. He had dug out a huge space and created a huge cave residence in the depths of the continent. The blood-robed king's enormous spiritual power still remained in the depths of his spirit. He had to digest this spiritual power as soon as possible, or it would dissipate easily. Therefore, after he killed the blood-robed king, he immediately found this place and used it as his place for seclusion. Sakyamuni, when I come out of seclusion, it will be time to kill you. A sharp light burst out from the depths of Zhuowen's eyes. Sakyamuni was undoubtedly the only mortal enemy he had feared for so many years. Back then, he had killed Sakyamuni, but he had not been able to completely destroy him and had been lucky enough to escape. He had thought that he would leave Sakyamuni further and further behind, so he did not care too much. But now, he discovered that not only was Sakura's cultivation advancement not weaker than his, it was even stronger than his. The speed of Sakyamuni's progress shocked and terrified Zhuowen. He knew that he had to destroy Sakyamuni as soon as possible to prevent future troubles. While Zhuowen was in closed-door cultivation, what he didn't know was that his reputation had already spread throughout the entire 100 Outer Territories. In addition to the mysterious 5 invincible domains and the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy, the 9 supreme domains, countless high-grade, middle-grade, and low-grade domains were all discussing Zhuowen's name. The reason was none other than that Zhuowen had killed dozens of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts by himself. They were all genuine lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts who stood at the peak of the 100 domains. However, they had been killed by Zhuowen as if they were chickens. Moreover, the fallen lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts included the blood-robed king, who was at the late stage of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. How could this not shake the entire 100 domains? As soon as the news spread, many experts from the 9 major domains could no longer sit still. The Divine Blaze domain was the #1 domain among the 9 supreme domains. Not only did it have a vast territory, but also had an extremely dense amount of chaotic energy. It could be said to be a holy land for cultivation. At this moment, in the core zone of the Divine Spark world, inside the Divine Spark Temple, 2 majestic golden figures sat facing each other. Blazing light enveloped their bodies, making them look like 2 inextinguishable suns. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the 2 golden figures were a man and a woman. The man was extraordinarily handsome, and the woman was as beautiful as a fairy. At first glance, they were a match made in heaven. The 2 of them were 2 of the 4 Dharma Kings of the Divine Blaze domain, Dharma King Jin Quan and Dharma King Jin Quan. Dharmaraja Golden Blade and Dharmaraja Jin Quan were a pair of Tao companions. Their strength was even above Dharmaraja Golden Lamp. They were truly terrifying experts. Jindo, it seems like Jin Deng is in trouble. Dharmaraja Jin Quan, who was as beautiful as a fairy, slowly opened her seductive eyes and stared at the handsome man opposite her. Dharmaraja Golden Blade also opened his eyes, which emitted a sharp divine light. He nodded and said, "I also received the news. It is said that a person called Zhuowen appeared in the extraterritorial battlefield. This person killed dozens of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts. Even the blood cloak King Shui Feng was killed by this person." Dharmaraja Jin Quan exclaimed, "What an incredible person! A nameless person can actually kill so many lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts. Where did he come from?" Dharmaraja Golden Blade frowned slightly and said, "This person's origin is still unclear. However, one thing is certain. This person is an old acquaintance of the Nadi Shiva. I'm afraid that he also came from the lower domain." Dharmaraja Jin Quan and Dharmaraja Golden Blade had always paid attention to Sakyamuni. They had also investigated the latter's information and knew that the latter came from an inconspicuous lower domain. Since Zhuowen and Sakyamuni were old acquaintances, they should also come from the same lower domain. This is unbelievable. What kind of lower domain could produce 2 talents like dragons and tigers at the same time? Dharmaraja Jin Quan frowned slightly and said, "Jin Deng seems to be a little scared. He started to ask us for help." Dharmaraja Jin Quan sneered. "Of course. Jin Deng is only a little stronger than Shui Feng. Even Shui Feng died in the hands of Zhuowen. I'm afraid that Jin Deng will be in trouble if he goes up against this person." Dharmaraja Jin Quan said calmly. Let's go. Although I hate Jindang, he is after all the Dharmaraja of our divine spark region. We can't lose him. Dharmaraja, Jin Quan slowly stood up and said lightly. Dharmaraja, Jin Quan nodded and held Dharmaraja, Jin Xuan's hand. They stood up and disappeared from the magnificent divine temple. At the same time, in the alternate ghost region, the evil Ghost King and the divine Ghost King had contacted each other and left the alternate ghost region. They were aware of the seriousness of the situation. They knew that relying on Sakyamuni and the ghost child was not enough, so they came out of seclusion. In the Bloodthorn region, the bloodthirsty king's eyes were red. He smashed a huge blood mountain with one slap. He sat on top of the blood cloud high in the sky. His scarlet eyes looked up at the blood-red sky and roared, Zhuowen, you dare to kill my brother. I want you to pay with your blood. After that, the bloodthirsty king's right hand swiped across the void and a huge blood-red crack appeared. After the bloodthirsty king stepped into the blood-red crack, the crack closed by itself. Other than the divine spark region, the alternate ghost region, and the bloodthorn region, the other supreme regions also took action. Although most of the true lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts had died in the extraterritorial battlefield, the remaining early-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts had organized themselves and were ready to go to the extraterritorial battlefield to suppress Zhuowen. While the 9 supreme regions were in an uproar over Zhuowen, the Ryuka people in the Kanglan region, hidden among the higher-level regions, also received the news. As expected of our Lord of the Domain, he killed lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts like they were dogs. Haha, this is so satisfying. Those were dozens of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts, but they were all killed by our Lord of the Domain. The Lord of the Domain is too powerful. The people of the entire Kanglan region were cheering for Zhuowen. They were excited and shouted. However, the Ryuka people were quite calm. They knew very well that the Kanglan region they had created was still very weak. Before they became strong enough, they must not expose the relationship between the Kanglan region and Zhuowen. Once it was exposed, the Kanglan region would face a disaster. In the core of the Kanglan region, Kanglan City, in a luxurious palace, Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, Mu Qinxue, Moyan Wushang, Purple Star-Lord, Lu Han Tian, and other core Ryuka people were gathered. In front of them stood 3 travel-worn figures. These 3 figures were none other than Duan Jipeng, Zi Yang, and Lu Oya, who had successfully left the extraterritorial battlefield under the cover of Zhuowen. You 3 have called for a meeting as soon as you returned. What is so important? Long Xiaotian looked at Duan Jipeng and the other 2 and asked rather puzzledly. When the news of Zhuowen killing dozens of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts spread, Duan Jipeng and the other 2 had just returned to the Kanglan region. Chapter 46:18. Yes, since the 3 of you are back, why hasn't Winner come back yet? Also, why is he being besieged by so many law phenomenon experts? Although Feng Xiao was puzzled by the sudden gathering of Duan Jipeng and the other 2, she was more worried about Zhuowen's safety. Brother Duan, what happened to my husband? Mu Qinxue and Moyan Wushang also hurriedly asked. After receiving the news of Zhuowen, their reaction was different from many cultivators in the Kanglan domain. They did not feel any excitement, but were full of worry. They knew very well that by killing so many lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts, Zhuowen had indirectly offended the powers behind these experts. Those were the experts of the 9 super domains. If this news spread, Zhuowen would probably have to face the encirclement of even more experts from the 9 super domains. This was not a good thing. Duan Jipeng smiled bitterly. Everyone, we are sorry. This time, Brother Zhuo gave up the opportunity to escape and created an opportunity for the 3 of us, so that we could return to the Kanglan domain smoothly. And his only request was for us to bring this thing back. As he spoke, Duan Jipeng took out a spherical fragment from his spatial artifact. As soon as this spherical fragment appeared, the entire hall was filled with extremely dense energy. What was even more strange was that the surface of the spherical fragment was covered with dense and complex runes and laws. What is this? I just took a look at it, and my comprehension ability has increased imperceptibly. Long Xiaotian said with a look of horror. Not only Long Xiaotian, but Feng Xiao, Mu Qinxue, and all the Koryuka clansmen in the hall were amazed by the magic of this spherical fragment. It was no exaggeration to say that if they cultivated in this spherical fragment for a day, it would be equivalent to decades or even hundreds of years of cultivation. This is an invincible domain origin fragment. This is just a trace of the domain origin fragment's aura. The real domain origin fragment is still inside my starlight world. Duan Jiping said in a deep voice. It's actually a domain origin fragment, an invincible one at that. Could this be? Mu Qinxue was extremely intelligent and immediately thought of something. Yes, Brother Zhuo became the foreign battlefield's public enemy because of this thing and has always been hunted down. Duan Jiping said solemnly. It's too dangerous for my husband now. I have to think of a way to save him. Mu Qinxue said worriedly. Duan Jiping hurriedly said, Miss Mo, it's best not to be so impulsive. Right now, we are too weak. If we go over, not only will we not be able to help, we will even be a burden to Brother Zhuo. Xiang also advised, Master Duan is right. Mistress, we can't help Master at all right now. Moreover, our Kanglan domain should stay dormant at this time. If the relationship between our domain and Master is exposed, the domain that Master painstakingly built will be destroyed in an instant. Long Xiaotian said with a soft sigh, Qin Shui, they are right. We are too weak. We can't help when... Mu Qinxue gave a deep sigh and slumped down in her seat. Moyan Wushang held Mu Qinxue's slender, jade-like hands and gently comforted her. Only then did Mu Qinxue's expression become slightly better. Jiping, since the three of you were sent back by Wen with his life, do you have a mission? Long Xiaotian looked at Duan Jiping's group of three and asked in a puzzled voice. Yes, you may not know this, but this domain origin fragment is very useful. With this origin fragment, it will be enough to turn our Kanglan domain into a true super gray domain in a short period of time. Moreover, it can quickly improve the comprehension and aptitude of the beings in the domain. Duan Jiping paused for a moment before continuing. With this origin fragment, our Kanglan domain will very likely become an existence that surpasses the 9 super gray domains. Next, what we need to do is to use this origin fragment to cultivate with all our might. Only by successfully advancing to the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth stage will we have the ability to help Brother Zhuo. As soon as his voice fell, the hall was silent for a moment before voices of agreement rang out. Husband, nothing must happen to you. We are all waiting for you. Mu Qinxue and Moyan Wushang looked up at the endless starry sky, silently praying for Zhuowen. Time passed by minute. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed. In the depths of the starry sky, a fragment was randomly floating in the starry sky. Suddenly, in the depths of this fragment, a terrifying energy as vast as the sea emerged. Rumble. The large fragment, like a balloon that had been inflated to the limit, exploded with a loud bang, turning into countless fine powder. A figure jumped out from the countless fragments, like a god or a demon, imposing and powerful. I really didn't expect that absorbing and digesting the blood-robed king's divine soul would take me half a year. This figure was none other than Zhuowen, who had been in seclusion in the starry sky. Just a moment ago, he had completely digested the blood-robed king's divine soul, causing his divine soul to completely transform and reach the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Originally, Zhuowen did not need to spend so much time to absorb the divine soul. However, the blood-robed king's divine soul was very special. He had taken an unconventional approach to the divine soul. He had created his own secret technique to absorb the divine souls of those he killed to strengthen his own divine soul. It was also because the blood-robed king had absorbed other divine souls over the years that his divine soul was contaminated with too many impurities, causing it to be polluted. Before Zhuan absorbed the blood-robed king's divine soul, he had spent a lot of time cleaning up the impurities in the blood-robed king's divine soul. When these impurities had been completely removed, Zhuan began to absorb the divine soul and smoothly sublimated his own divine soul. Roar, roar, roar. Zhuan had just broken through the fragment continent when strange black shadows rapidly approached from the deep darkness of the extraterrestrial starry sky and surrounded Zhuan. You've come at the right time. My divine soul has just broken through. Let's test it out on you. Zhuan looked around and saw the huge black shadows. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. These extraterrestrial starry sky creatures were very powerful. If it had been in the past, he might have been afraid. However, after his divine soul had broken through to the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, his strength had reached an extremely terrifying level. He was not afraid of these strange black shadows that had surrounded him. Boundless sea of bitterness. Zhuan's right sword finger pointed at his glabella. Suddenly, a strange gray light surged and flickered between his eyebrows. Whoosh! A surging and magnificent divine soul burst out from the depths of Zhuan's glabella, forming a huge black sea of bitterness with a radius of billions of kilometers. Within the sea of bitterness, terrifying waves surged. Every time a huge wave slammed into the surrounding shadows, several of them would be smashed into smithereens. When the sea of bitterness gradually dispersed, there were no black shadows left within a radius of billions of kilometers around Zhuan. Everything had disappeared without a trace. It's time to leave the extraterrestrial battlefield. Zhuan looked in the direction of the extraterrestrial battlefield, his eyes flashing with a cold light. Now, his divine soul had reached an unprecedented height. He was confident that if he wanted to leave the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy's encampment, no one could stop him. Chapter 46:19. Inside the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy's encampment. Ever since the news of Zhuan killing dozens of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts spread, very few people were willing to accept the bounty for Zhuan issued by Sakyamuni and the others. Most of the cultivators were not fools. Although they were envious of the high bounty offered by Sakyamuni and the others, they also valued their lives more. The fact that Zhuan could kill lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts proved that his strength was at least at the late stage of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. This kind of strength was basically only possessed by the top 3 rulers of the supreme domains. Who would dare to provoke him? Although the number of people who accepted the bounty for Zhuan had decreased, the number of cultivators who entered the encampment had increased over the past 6 months. Many of them were cultivators who had heard of Zhuan's deeds and wanted to see Zhuan's elegant demeanor. Among this group of people, there were many real experts who had secretly mixed in. They were all supreme experts from the 9 supreme domains. Among them were the 2 great experts, Golden Blade Discipline King and Gold Authority King from the Divine Blaze domain, Divine Ghost King and Ice Demon King from the Alternate Ghost domain, and Bloodthirsty King from the Bloodthorn domain. However, these real experts basically did not reveal themselves. They only hid in the encampment secretly, waiting for their prey to appear. It's really strange. It's been 6 months. Where did Zhuan go? There's no movement at all. In a luxurious attic, the ghost child sat on the main seat and frowned. In this huge attic besides the ghost child, there were many other figures. These figures' auras were very powerful, including Sakyamuni and Golden Lamp Discipline King. In addition, Golden Blade Discipline King, Golden Authority King, Divine Ghost King, Ice Demon King, Bloodthirsty King, and several other experts at the late stage of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth were also gathered here. Could it be that the news of us coming to the extraterritorial battlefield was leaked? That Zhuan heard the news and has been hiding all this time? Golden Lamp Discipline King's eyes flashed. Impossible. Since the beginning, we have been hiding our auras. Even if Zhuan is in the foreign battlefield, he may not be able to sense us even if he is in the encampment. Golden Blade, Disciplined King sneered. Golden Lamp, you're getting more and more cowardly. Although that Zhuoan is strong, we have so many late-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts here. There are even 3 peak-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts here. Why are you so afraid? Fawang said mockingly. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja's face was gloomy. He looked coldly at Golden Authority Dharmaraja. Among the 4 Dharma Kings of the Divine Blaze boundary, Golden Lamp Dharma King was the weakest. His strength was slightly weaker than the other 3 Dharma Kings, so he was often looked down upon by the other 3 Dharma Kings. This also caused Golden Lamp Dharmaraja to have a bad relationship with the other 3 Dharmarajas. Back then, when so many of us besieged Zhuoan, we also said the same thing, but what happened in the end? Only the 3 of us were left. The rest died in the hands of that Zhuoan. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja snorted and continued. Golden Authority Dharmaraja, you'd better not underestimate that Zhuoan. Otherwise, you will suffer a great loss. They're just a group of trash. Golden Lamp, don't compare me with that group of trash. Since you are so afraid, you'd better get out of this team as soon as possible. Golden Authority Dharmaraja said sarcastically. Golden Lamp Dharmaraja was furious, but he remained silent. He knew very well that Golden Authority Dharmaraja wanted to provoke him and make sarcastic remarks. In fact, he was powerless to refute. In this operation to besiege Zhuoan, his performance was indeed very poor. Golden Authority Dharmaraja, watch your words. My brother Bloodrobe Dharmaraja is not trash. If you dare to say that he is trash again, I will attack you. Sitting in the corner of the room, Bloodthirsty Dharmaraja, whose body was as large as a small giant, stared coldly at Golden Authority Dharmaraja with scarlet eyes. The death of Bloodrobe Dharmaraja was a great blow to Bloodthirsty Dharmaraja. That was his only relative in this world. Now that he had been killed, one could imagine the anger in his heart. Golden Authority Dharmaraja's expression changed slightly, and he looked at Bloodthirsty Dharmaraja with fear. As the strongest Dharmaraja in the Bloodthorn realm, Bloodthirsty Dharmaraja's strength was not to be underestimated. His cultivation had reached the peak of the law phenomenon, and he was one of the 3 strongest experts in this team. After all, the Bloodthorn realm was ranked 3rd among the 9 supreme realms. It had a deep foundation and was naturally much stronger than most of the other supreme realms. All right. We're not here to quarrel, but to discuss how to capture that Zhuoan. Ice Dharmaraja suddenly opened his mouth. His voice was inexplicably cold, and the atmosphere suddenly became cold. Ice Dharmaraja is right. Those who want to quarrel can get out of here now. Don't disturb us from discussing important matters. Golden Blade Dharmaraja also spoke. Golden Authority Dharmaraja immediately shut his mouth when the 2 peak Dharmaraja experts spoke. Bloodthirsty Dharmaraja also gradually withdrew his aura. I personally think that Zhuoan should be in seclusion to cultivate. Sakyamuni, who was sitting at the side, suddenly spoke slowly. Everyone's gaze fell on Sakyamuni. Sakyamuni was the only junior present, but no one dared to look down on him. Sakyamuni's identity as the personal disciple of Yuan Sheng, one of the 9 great Saint Masters of the Archean Heavenly Academy, was enough to attract the attention of all the experts present. Ice Dharmaraja smiled and said, Sure Tian, why do you say so? When Sakyamuni was first brought out of the lower realm and came to the alternate ghost realm, he was the one who became the Ice Dharmaraja's disciple. It could be said that the Ice Dharmaraja was Sakyamuni's first teacher, and the 2 of them had the closest relationship. Sakyamuni was able to enter the Archean Heavenly Academy and achieve his current status because of the Ice Dharmaraja. Sakyamuni cupped his hands and said to the Ice Dharmaraja, with the strength of all the seniors, you can hide your aura. That Zhuoan can't sense you, and all the teleportation portals in the encampment are monitored by our people. That Zhuoan can't sneak out. This kid killed so many Dharmaraja experts a while ago and took away their huge amount of resources. In addition to the resources in the ruins, this is an unprecedented amount of wealth. If I were him, I would definitely find a place to hide. In a secluded place, I can continuously cultivate and increase my cultivation. When he's strong enough, he can come out of seclusion. Then, no one could do anything to him. When that time comes, no one can stop him from going wherever he wants to go. Once this was said, everyone present nodded inwardly. There was no doubt that Sakyamuni's analysis was logical, and very convincing. Chapter 46:20. Golden Blade Shakyamuni, Golden Power Shakyamuni, and Golden Lamp Shakyamuni's faces turned ugly. For so many years, the divine spark boundary had been pressured by the deviant ghost boundary step by step, and their position as the leader had been shaken. If not for the divine spark boundary's strongest Shakyamuni, Golden Supreme Shakyamuni, who was still in the divine spark boundary, the deviant ghost boundary might have already surpassed the divine spark boundary. To the divine spark boundary, Sakyamuni was like a thorn in their throat. Once this thorn grew bigger, it would cause an unimaginable impact to the divine spark boundary. Nephew Shirtion, according to what you said, if that Zhuowen really hides in the divine spark boundary, won't we have to wait in vain? Wait until Zhuowen's strength increases greatly? God knows how long we have to wait. Golden Blade, Shakyamuni said indifferently. The corners of Sakyamuni's mouth curled up, and he said, "During this time, I didn't come out empty-handed. All the signs indicate that Zhuowen is not in the extraterritorial battlefield." His words caused an uproar among the crowd. If he's not in the extraterritorial battlefield, where could he be? Could it be that he has successfully escaped? Golden Law, Shakyamuni sneered. Bloodthirsty King narrowed his eyes and suddenly said, "You mean that Zhuowen is hiding in the extraterritorial battlefield's extraterritorial battlefield?" Sakyamuni smiled. "That's right. When we first besieged Zhuowen, I always suspected that Zhuowen seemed to have appeared out of thin air in the extraterritorial battlefield, and then disappeared into thin air. It's all too strange. Combined with the fact that the Blood-Robed King's corpse has not been found, I'm 90% sure that Zhuowen is in the extraterritorial battlefield, and that's where the Blood-Robed King died." Bloodthirsty King suddenly stood up and said fiercely, "Damn little bastard. If that's the case, then he deserves to be killed. How dare he throw my brother's corpse in the extraterritorial battlefield? I want to go to the extraterritorial battlefield to find my brother's corpse and kill that little bastard." The extraterritorial battlefield's body was filled with all kinds of ferocious beasts all year round. Blood-Robed King's corpse was bound to be eaten by many beasts. "Wait, Bloodthirsty King, this is a critical time. Don't act alone." Jindo Dharmaraja frowned and quickly advised. Unfortunately, the Bloodthirsty King did not care about Jindo Fuang at all. He pushed open the door heavily, turned into a bloody light, and disappeared from the station. Bloodthirsty King is too impulsive. If we act rashly and alert the enemy, then Zhuowen might escape. The Gold Authority King said unhappily. Sakyamuni smiled faintly and said, "Then let the Bloodthirsty King take the lead for us." The Ice Demon King looked at Sakyamuni and asked, "Shirtion, what do you mean?" Everyone looked at Sakura, not understanding what was going on. Over the past 6 months, I've refined many ghosts using the 100 Ghost portrait. I secretly ordered these ghosts to hide in the extraterritorial battlefield and the extraterritorial starry sky in order to monitor Zhuowen's position. When I realized that Zhuowen might be hiding in the extraterritorial starry sky, I arranged more ghosts to hide in the dark depths of the extraterritorial starry sky. As long as Zhuowen appears in the extraterritorial starry sky, near the extraterritorial battlefield, I'll be able to sense it immediately. As he spoke, Sakyamuni waved his sleeve, and a huge image appeared in the sky above the room. In the image, it showed a vast and boundless dark starry sky. In this dark starry sky, there were countless black shadows, waiting for the appearance of their prey, ready to launch a fierce attack at any time. In this dark starry sky, a flowing light was flying over at an extremely fast speed. Everyone looked over and realized that the flowing light was actually a young man in black. This person is Zhuan? Jindo Fuang's eyes were like torches. He had seen Zhuan's portrait before. Now that he saw Zhuan, he immediately recognized him. It's Zhuan. Where is he flying to instead of hiding? Divine Ghost King frowned and asked in surprise. Sakyamuni said in a deep voice, he's heading towards the encampment. I think he'll meet the bloodthirsty king soon. Let's not be in a hurry. Let's see how strong he is. Everyone raised their eyebrows, but they did not raise any objections. This group of people seemed to be gathered together, but in fact they were like a sheet of loose sand. Especially the experts from the Divine Blaze domain and Ghost domain, they were not in a hurry at all. Although some of the experts from these two domains have been killed by Zhuan, the real experts such as Jinding Fuang and the Ghost Child had not died. Their losses were much less than the other supreme domains. Among this group of people, the only one who was in a hurry to kill Zhuan was the bloodthirsty king. The others were assessing the situation and how to maximize their benefits in this encirclement. That Zhuan stopped and looked over at us. Did he discover the ghost you arranged? Jinquan Fuang suddenly exclaimed. Everyone looked over. Sure enough, they saw that Zhuan had stopped and was looking over coldly. Zhuan suddenly flicked his sleeve, and a terrifying divine power surged out. Then, the image floating in the air completely disappeared. This child is extremely sensitive to ghosts, and he has some kind of secret technique that can refine ghosts and create a similar aura to them, making them recognize him as one of them. In the first encirclement, we suffered such a big loss and were defeated one by this child. Sakyamuni said unhurriedly. With a wave of his sleeve, another image appeared in the air. This image tracked Zhuan's back. As I said, I've arranged many ghosts in the starry sky. Unless this Zhuan is killed, he will have nowhere to hide once I discover him. Sakyamuni said confidently. Everyone was shocked, and a trace of fear rose in their hearts toward Sakyamuni. Although this child was a junior, he was extremely scheming and was truly terrifying. Next, the image released by Sakyamuni was constantly destroyed and reconstructed, constantly tracking Zhuan's tracks. Finally, Zhuan in the image stopped again. However, this time, Zhuan did not attack the ghost spying on him. Instead, he looked ahead with a serious gaze. Everyone also saw that in front of Zhuan in the image, a huge blood-red figure appeared. When they saw the blood-red figure clearly, they were not too surprised, because this blood-red figure was none other than the bloodthirsty king who had just left. This Zhuan is really unlucky. He just returned, and he already encountered the bloodthirsty king. The ghost child chuckled. Zhuan's strength was indeed very strong, but in his opinion, it should be between the late and peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. If he encountered a true peak lawful embodiment of heaven and earth expert, he did not think that Zhuan would be a match for him. After all, Zhuan's seclusion this time was too short. It was only half a year. In just half a year, nothing could change. Zhuan's strength could not have increased by leaps and bounds. Chapter 46:21. Ever since Zhuan came out of seclusion, he had been rushing toward the extraterritorial battlefield. As he got closer and closer to the extraterritorial battlefield, Zhuan felt that he was being watched in the dark. Soon, he found the source of the peeping. It was a ghost in the depths of the darkness. Is it really a ghost refined by Sakyamuni using the 100 Ghost portrait? Does that mean my location has been exposed? Zhuan stared at the darkness. Then, he rolled up his sleeves, and a surge of divine power poured out like an ocean. The ghosts hiding in the dark didn't even have the time to scream before their bodies and souls were destroyed. They couldn't be more dead. After destroying the ghost in an instant, Zhuan did not think too much about it and continued to move forward. At this moment, he was no longer afraid of Sakyamuni, the ghost child, and the golden lamp guardian king. So what if his location was exposed? Even if the three of them attacked him together, Zhuan was not afraid at all. Along the way, Zhuan discovered many ghosts wandering in the dark in the form of spying, but they were basically all destroyed by Zhuowen. About hundreds of billions of kilometers away from the border of the extraterritorial battlefield, Zhuowen suddenly stopped and looked straight ahead with narrowed eyes. Not far ahead, a huge blood-red figure, like a small mountain, stood in front of him. This person's appearance was that of a middle-aged man with a resolute face. He was 6 meters tall, and the muscles all over his body were bulging like pieces of rocks that were connected together. His entire body was filled with a heavy feeling of strength and deterrence. "Who are you?" Zhuowen frowned slightly, but he was secretly vigilant. This was the extraterritorial battlefield's extraterritorial starry sky. Ordinary cultivators would not enter the extraterritorial starry sky. It was tantamount to courting death. Since this person dared to enter the extraterritorial starry sky, he was probably not a kind person. Moreover, Zhuowen felt a very strong killing intent from this person, and this killing intent happened to be directed at him. This huge blood-red figure was none other than Bloodthirsty King, who had come out to search for the Blood-Robed King's corpse. The Bloodthirsty King's scarlet eyes stared straight at Zhuowen. The killing intent on his body was like a violent storm, becoming more and more terrifying. It was truly a case of wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it by chance without any effort. "Zhuowen, I didn't expect to meet you so soon." Bloodthirsty King faced the sky and laughed like a mad demon. His entire body exploded with a terrifying aura that made people tremble in fear. Many of the shattered continents floating around him were affected by his aura and started to collapse. What a powerful aura! Zhuowen squinted his eyes, shocked by the terrifying aura released by the Bloodthirsty King. This aura was far stronger than the Blood-Robed King's. The two of them were not even on the same level. Could this person be an expert at the pinnacle of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth? Thinking of this, Zhuowen's face suddenly turned gloomy. He did not expect to meet such a terrifying expert in the extraterrestrial starry sky. He had to admit that his luck was really bad. "Zhuowen, I came to the extraterrestrial starry sky to find the corpse of my brother, the Blood-Robed King. I didn't have any hope of finding you, but you just happened to appear in front of me. This is really a heaven-sent opportunity." Bloodthirsty King grinned and stepped forward with his right foot. Rumble. With him as the center, an extremely wide area of the starry sky collapsed one after another. Everything exploded, and then terrifying, enormous ravines were formed in all directions. With just a single step, it was already so powerful. Zhuowen's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He really felt a sense of danger from the Bloodthirsty King. "How are you related to the Blood-Robed King?" Zhuowen asked with a gloomy look. The moment he heard the name Blood-Robed King, the Bloodthirsty King became even more agitated. He suddenly punched out with his right fist toward Zhuowen. The terrifying fist radiance, like a meteor, pierced through the sky and landed heavily on Zhuowen's body. With just one punch, Zhuowen felt that it was difficult to resist. Slash! Zhuowen did not even think about it. He released his soul sword essence and slashed forward. Rumble. The purplish gold divine soul sword intent collided heavily with the blood-red fist light, causing an unprecedented explosion. Zhuowen took a few steps back and looked at the figure in front of him with fear. The strength of a peak lawful embodiment of heaven and earth was much stronger than that of a late-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The difference was like heaven and earth. What a powerful soul. No wonder you could kill my brother, Shuefeng. It turns out that your soul has reached the late-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The Bloodthirsty King narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhuowen with surprise. He finally understood that the Bloodthirsty King's defeat was not unjust. Although Zhuowen's cultivation was not strong, the strength of his soul was something he had never seen before. No matter how strong your soul is, it's only on par with mine. My soul and cultivation have both reached the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. You have no chance of winning against me. The Bloodthirsty King grinned and did not take Zhuowen seriously. He continued, "Now, kill yourself in front of me as an apology. That way, you will suffer less." Zhuowen sneered and said, "You can't kill me." Not to mention that Zhuowen had many trump cards. The bloodthirsty king might not be able to defeat him if he did not use his trump cards. It was wishful thinking for him to kill himself as an apology. "Can't kill you? Then I'm really going to kill you today." The bloodthirsty king was completely enraged. Like a lion that had just woken up from a deep sleep, he took a step forward. The starry sky around him seemed to shake a few times. Then he shot toward Zhuowen like a blood arrow. Good timing. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with battle intent. Ever since his soul had broken through to the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, Zhuowen's comprehension of the primordial grand mist technique had reached a new level. His battle prowess had actually undergone an earth-shaking transformation once again. Rumble. Zhuowen and the bloodthirsty king crashed into each other in the depths of the starry sky, setting off a terrifying explosion that was unprecedented in history. Boom, boom, boom. The explosions became more and more intense. Terrifying black holes spread out, covering the entire starry sky. The bloodthirsty king's fists punched out continuously. Every punch contained the power of 10,000 caddies. He could turn Zhuowen into meat paste with a single punch. On the other hand, Zhuowen countered every move. Using the space between his eyebrows, he sent out streaks of soul sword intent at the bloodthirsty king. He held them with both hands and continuously attacked the bloodthirsty king, blocking the bloodthirsty king's violent and terrifying attacks. The more they fought, the fiercer the battle became. The starry sky seemed to be on the verge of shattering. The fragments floating in the vicinity were all shattered into dust. Countless black figures hiding in the depths of the starry sky tried to escape. Some of them could not escape in time and were directly torn to pieces by the shock waves from the two's attacks. The battle between the two continued to spread until it reached the border of the extraterrestrial battlefield. Chapter 4622. Boom! A figure was blown away, crashing into the boundary of the extraterritorial battlefield with an earth-shaking boom. Inside the extraterritorial battlefield, countless experts of the human clan and the alien clan sensed something and looked toward the boundary. Some of them even used their movement techniques to dash toward the boundary. They wanted to see where the commotion came from. Zhuowen jumped out of the extraterritorial battlefield's boundary and hovered in the air, looking at the bloodthirsty king with fear. The bloodthirsty king's body was extremely strong. Every move of his contained terrifying power. The moment Zhuowen and the bloodthirsty king started fighting, Zhuowen was already at a disadvantage. If it weren't for his divine soul protecting his body, Zhuowen would have been severely injured. "I told you, you're not my match. I asked you to kill yourself to atone for your sins, but you refused. Now you have no chance. Next, I will torture you to death and let you taste all the tortures in this world." The bloodthirsty king's eyes flashed with a bloody light. He stomped his right foot on the ground again and pounced on Zhuowen like a bolt of lightning. Zhuowen took a deep breath. The purple gold light between his eyebrows shone brightly, releasing streaks of divine soul sword essence. Each of the streaks of divine soul sword essence was thousands of meters long. There were hundreds of them. Combined, Zhuowen clenched his right hand, and the hundreds of streaks of divine soul sword essence fused together, forming a gigantic purple gold sword. The aura of this purple gold sword was so terrifying that it suppressed the bloodthirsty kings. Slash! Zhuowen suddenly raised his sword finger above his head, and then heavily slashed down. The gigantic purple gold sword fell from the sky and slashed the bloodthirsty king's body. The bloodthirsty king frowned and snorted. He punched out with both fists, intending to resist with his body. Boom! The two collided, releasing a terrifying energy. Then, a shocking scene appeared. The bloodthirsty king was sent flying backward by the slash and smashed into the boundary of the extraterritorial battlefield. What terrifying power! Who the hell are those two people? The power they exude is too frightening. That blood-red figure was so familiar. That's That's the bloodthirsty king from the Bloodthorn realm. He's an expert at the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. When the bloodthirsty king smashed into the boundary barrier, many cultivators who heard the commotion and came over recognized him. Most of the cultivators naturally knew the kings of the 9 great realms, and the bloodthirsty king was even more infamous. There were even more cultivators who knew him. Who is the bloodthirsty king's opponent? He was actually sent flying and crashed into the boundary barrier. Could it be Jindao Shakyamuni or Jinzman Shakyamuni from the Divine Blaze domain, or the Ice Fiend King from the alternate Ghost domain? Everyone couldn't help but look at the figure opposite the bloodthirsty king. When they saw the figure clearly, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. This was because they were all too familiar with this figure. He was none other than Zhuowen, who had been on the wanted list recently. How could it be him? This Zhuowen has actually become so strong that he can fight evenly with the bloodthirsty king? Everyone was completely shocked. The story of Zhuowen killing dozens of lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts had long been spread throughout the 100 domains. They all knew that Zhuowen was very strong, but they didn't expect Zhuowen to be so strong that he could fight evenly with an expert at the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. An expert at the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth was already standing at the pinnacle of the super domains. If the experts from the invincible domain didn't appear, who could do anything to an expert at this level? At this moment, everyone was finally filled with a deep fear of Zhuowen. This person was too strong and far from being an existence they could provoke. Slash again. Zhuowen's eyes were cold and gloomy. The sword fingers on his right hand pointed again, and the hundreds of thousands of feet long purple gold divine sword slashed across the sky and blasted towards the bloodthirsty king again. The bloodthirsty king's expression finally changed. Zhuowen's strength was somewhat beyond his expectations. He stomped his foot, leaving behind a blood-red shadow in the starry sky, and then dodged Zhuowen's sword. Rumble. The huge divine sword missed and slashed at the boundary barrier of the extraterritorial battlefield, causing an earth-shattering explosion. The boundary barrier trembled violently and was on the verge of collapse, as if it would collapse at any time. Many of the spectating cultivators watched with trepidation. They were all worried that the boundary barrier would be shattered by Zhuowen's sword. Fortunately, the barrier didn't shatter as they had feared. Instead, it shook violently and returned to its original calm state. Dying. After dodging Zhuowen's spiritual sword intent, the bloodthirsty king stepped on the air and rushed towards Zhuowen at lightning speed. His physical body was too strong. As he flew over, he tore a huge gully in the starry sky. The huge fragments of the continent in front of him were all smashed into smithereens by him. In the blink of an eye, the bloodthirsty king arrived in front of Zhuowen. His right fist fiercely punched toward Zhuowen's face. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. The bloodthirsty king's punch was even more powerful than before. He reacted extremely quickly. His right hand sword fingers crossed in front of him, and a huge spiritual sword intent instantly flashed in front of him, blocking the terrifying fist of the bloodthirsty king. Dong! The fist collided with the sword blade, and a distant sound like a bell rang out. Zhuowen groaned and couldn't help but retreat tens of thousands of steps. His feet stepped on the starry sky, plowing a huge spatial gully in it. Zhuowen, this king has underestimated you. You are really strong. Xuefeng dying in your hands is really not an injustice. The bloodthirsty king hovered in the starry sky, staring at Zhuowen with his blood-red eyes, full of seriousness. His words were actually a disguised admission that Zhuowen was on the same level as him. He had already begun to treat Zhuowen as an equal. Not only Xuefeng, but you will also die in my hands. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He bent his right hand, and a huge spiritual sword intent nimbly circled around his body, as if it was the most loyal guard. You really don't know your own limits. Although you're not weak, there is still a huge gap between you and me, because I still haven't released my lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The bloodthirsty king sneered. Suddenly, a terrifying aura burst out from his body. This aura became more and more terrifying and vast. It was as if the starry sky couldn't withstand his aura, and it began to distort. Zhuan's eyes became serious. He sensed a strong sense of danger from the bloodthirsty king. The bloodthirsty king roared towards the sky, and a terrifying sound wave spread throughout the chaotic starry sky. Then, the bloodthirsty king's body grew taller by 10 feet, and his aura continued to surge like a tsunami. In the end, the bloodthirsty king's body grew to 1,000,000 feet tall. He stood in the starry sky, looking down at Zhuan indifferently. What a terrifying aura! Is this the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth of the bloodthirsty king? It is so much stronger than an ordinary lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Is this the power of a peak lawful embodiment of heaven and earth? It is so much stronger than a late-stage lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. In the extraterritorial battlefield, both the human race and the foreign race cultivators were shocked by the terrifying aura released by the bloodthirsty king. Chapter 46:23. Zhuan looked solemn as he stared at the huge lawful embodiment of heaven and earth in front of him. The lawful embodiment of heaven and earth of the bloodthirsty king was similar to his actual body. It was a blood-red humanoid with a well-developed body. However, the strange thing about this blood-red humanoid was that it didn't have a head. Instead, it only had 4 muscular limbs and was holding a huge blood-red meteor hammer in both hands. Overall, it looked very powerful. At the same time, in the Archean Heavenly Tao Academy's encampment, Sakyamuni, Jindo, Dharmaraja, the Ice Demon King, and many other experts were sitting in a luxurious pavilion, silently watching the image floating in the middle of the sky. At this moment, the image was showing the battle between Zhuan and the bloodthirsty king in the extraterritorial starry sky. This Zhuan is not ordinary. His divine soul has reached the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. The bloodthirsty king was forced to use the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Jindo Dharmaraja's eyes flashed as he said coldly, in Dharmaraja's opinion, the bloodthirsty king should be able to kill Zhuan easily without using the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Now, he had underestimated Zhuan too much. The Ice Demon King's face was cold. He looked at Sakyamuni and saw that the latter was clenching his fists tightly. He thought to himself, this Zhuan is indeed the guy who defeated Shi Tiandi. Even though he has no natural ancestral Dao root, he can still achieve this. When he thought of this, the killing intent in the Ice Demon King's eyes became extremely strong. Zhuan's threat was too great. If he was allowed to continue developing, he would only hinder Sakyamuni's future development. This would not be good for his plans to expand the alternate ghost domain in the future. Therefore, Zhuan had to die. Look, the bloodthirsty king is starting to move. This battle should be about to come to an end. Dharmaraja suddenly said, his eyes fixed on the image above. Everyone's eyes also fell on the image. As expected, the bloodthirsty king, who had used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, had started to attack. At this moment, the bloodthirsty king's huge lawful embodiment of heaven and earth suddenly took a step forward. Everywhere he passed, the starry sky couldn't withstand his power and shattered. Roar! The bloodthirsty king let out a thunderous roar and charged forward like a shooting star. Zhuan's expression turned serious. The bloodthirsty king, who had unleashed the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, was much more powerful. If Bloodthirsty King's aura could be compared to a small stream at the beginning, then Bloodthirsty King's aura was now as vast as the ocean. Rip! The Bloodthirsty King's speed was too fast. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Zhuan. Zhuan, you're able to force me to use the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Even if you die, it's an honor. The Bloodthirsty King's body rumbled, emitting the sound of rolling thunder like the might of the heavens. His right fist brushed past the starry sky, ruthlessly punching towards Zhuowen's face. The punch was far too terrifying. Just the astral winds that swept out from the punch extended over 1,000,000,000,000 kilometers. The surrounding space was covered in dense cracks like a spiderweb. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. He pointed the sword fingers of his right hand in front of him. Hundreds of thousands of feet of spiritual sword intent appeared in front of him, like an insurmountable chasm. Rumble! The bloodthirsty king's fist arrived in an instant, landing heavily on the blade of the spiritual sword intent. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped. Everything seemed to be replaying in slow motion. In the extraterritorial battlefield, all the spectating cultivators couldn't help but squint their eyes and cover their ears. Crack! In this extremely slow flow of time, a crisp cracking sound rang out. It was like the clear sound of a bell breaking through the clouds. The spiritual sword intent that was like a chasm in front of Zhuowen instantly shattered into countless specks of light. Little bastard, let's see what else you can do to stop me. The bloodthirsty king looked up to the sky and laughed maniacally. He punched again, this time even fiercer and more terrifying than before. In the extraterritorial battlefield, countless cultivators sighed inwardly. The bloodthirsty king was too powerful. He was so powerful that no one dared to face him directly. It was already commendable that Zhuowen could fight with the bloodthirsty king to this extent. There was no doubt that Zhuowen had won everyone's respect in this battle. This was because he was the first cultivator to face a peak lawful embodiment of heaven and earth head-on with his inverse ancient starlight cultivation. This battle record was unprecedented and would never be replicated in the future. Die! In the depths of the bloodthirsty king's eyes, a scarlet light burst out. He was overjoyed. He knew that with this punch, Zhuowen would definitely die. He would also be able to avenge his brother, the blood-robed king. Bloodthirsty king, don't underestimate me. Zhuowen was as calm as still water. He didn't show the slightest hint of panic because of the bloodthirsty king's aggressive punch. He pointed his right sword finger at his glabella again. In an instant, a blazing purple-gold light shot out from his glabella. It instantly dyed the vast starry sky in a purple-gold color. Such a powerful spiritual strength. What is this guy trying to do? When the bloodthirsty king sensed the terrifying spiritual energy in front of him, a look of surprise appeared on his face. His fist also paused. Zhuowen grasped this opportunity and clenched the 5 fingers of his right hand. Spirit power as vast as the sea instantly condensed together. A gigantic purple-gold divine sword that was at least 1,000,000 feet long appeared in the middle of the starry sky. The bloodthirsty king paled. He had thought that Zhuowen's divine soul sword intent, which was hundreds of thousands of feet long, was his limit. He didn't expect that he had underestimated this guy. Whoosh! Zhuowen floated in the starry sky, expressionless. He suddenly slashed his right sword finger to the right. The gigantic spiritual sword essence instantly slashed out. The target of this spiritual sword essence was the bloodthirsty king, who was close at hand. The sword was too fast. The bloodthirsty king was too close to Zhuowen. He couldn't dodge it at all. Break! The bloodthirsty king retracted his fist and took 3 steps back. He opened his palms and pushed them out toward the spiritual sword essence. Boom! 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 When the bloodthirsty king's fists collided with the spiritual sword essence, there were continuous explosions in the air. One after another, white rings of chi spread out endlessly, crashing into the depths of the starry sky. Even the shapeless barrier at the border of the Outerium battlefield was pushed by this terrifying ring of chi to the point it was on the verge of collapse, and it trembled violently. It caused the hearts of all the spectating cultivators to shudder as they were deeply afraid the barrier would be forcefully destroyed by the ring of chi. However, the barrier at the border of the extraterritorial battlefield was set up by many powerful figures. Although it started to shake violently, it eventually resisted the terrifying chi rings. Look, after the barrier stabilized, Many onlookers heaved a sigh of relief. Then, a cry of surprise attracted everyone's attention. When they looked up again and looked into the depths of the starry sky, they all gasped. The bloodthirsty king's palms were tightly grasping the spiritual sword essence. He couldn't resist the terrifying force of the spiritual sword essence and was constantly pushed back. Wherever this enormous divine soul sword intent passed, countless fragments were directly sliced in half, and the living beings hidden in the darkness were completely annihilated without being able to dodge in time. Chapter 46:24. Rumble. The bloodthirsty king's lawful embodiment of heaven and earth slammed into the barrier of the extraterritorial battlefield. The barrier caved in for almost 1,000 feet. Unbelievably, the invisible barrier was more resilient than anyone had expected. Even after the barrier caved in so deeply, it didn't break. It was as steady as Mount Tai. The bloodthirsty king roared angrily. The blood-colored muscles on his body suddenly expanded, and his strength increased several times. He pushed his palms forward, and a 1,000,000-foot-long divine soul sword intent was flung away. Zhuan's right hand pointed at the void, and he barely controlled the divine soul sword intent that was flung away. He looked at the bloodthirsty king with a serious expression. The bloodthirsty king was indeed powerful. Condensing a 1,000,000-foot-long divine soul sword intent was already the limit of his divine soul. However, it still couldn't injure him. It was obvious how powerful the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth was. The bloodthirsty king walked over step by step. His face was pale, and his breathing was rapid. There was a huge wound on his palms, so deep that his bones could be seen. Sticky blood kept dripping, and it turned into red flames in the starry sky. When one's cultivation reached the bloodthirsty king's level, their flesh, blood, and bones were all supernatural powers. If a drop of his blood fell into the starry sky of the lower realm, it would be enough to burn the entire lower realm. Little bastard, you've completely angered me. Today, I will tear you into pieces. The bloodthirsty king was fuming with anger. Being entangled with Zhuan for so long was the biggest humiliation of his life. At the same time, he was inexplicably shocked. Zhuan's strength made him fearful and terrified. This kid's cultivation was only at the inverse ancient starlight realm. Even if his divine soul was powerful and had reached the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, he shouldn't be a match for the bloodthirsty king. After all, the bloodthirsty king's physical body and divine soul had both reached the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. His strength was far above Zhuan's. No matter how one looked at it, there was a great disparity between their strengths. In fact, the bloodthirsty king's lawful embodiment of heaven and earth couldn't suppress Zhuan. Instead, he was defeated by Zhuan. This kid's divine soul sword intent is not simple. Bloodthirsty king squinted his eyes. With his sharp eyes, he could see that Zhuan's god soul was powerful, something he had never seen before. The spiritual sword intent was the first spiritual mystique that Zhuan had obtained. Its level was not high, but it had unlimited potential. After Zhuan's ceaseless improvement and creation throughout the years, the divine ability of the soul sword insight had been reborn a long time ago, and its might was almost on par with the boundless sea of bitterness sutra and the dark heaven palm. If Zhuowen's spirit was even stronger, he could even create a spirit sword intent that was millions or even tens of millions of meters long. One sword was enough to annihilate any lawful embodiment of heaven and earth expert. Clang! The bloodthirsty king pulled out the two-handed meteor hammer from his back and swung it with both hands. The meteor hammer whooshed through the air, and the clanging sound of chains extending could be heard in the starry sky. What surprised Zhuan was that when the meteor hammer approached him, it suddenly split into hundreds and thousands of meteor hammers, and its speed instantly increased by several times. In the blink of an eye, it was as if hundreds and thousands of blood-colored meteors had appeared in front of Zhuo in irregular trajectories. They drew out countless irregular lines of blood and enveloped Zhuo from all directions, enveloping him in the middle. Zhuo's expression turned serious. He pointed his sword finger again, and a huge divine soul sword intent slashed through the air, ruthlessly slashing at the numerous blood-red meteors in front of him. But what shocked him was at the moment the divine soul sword intent touched the blood-red meteors, it was immediately bounced back. Slash, slash, slash. Zhuo did not believe it. He slashed out again and again, and a terrifying sword intent overflowed, forming a terrifying sword chi storm in the starry sky. But what made Zhuo's expression turn ugly was that when the divine soul sword intent slashed at the blood-red meteors in front of him, it was completely useless. They were all bounced back. Zhuo stopped struggling. This theurgy is called the Blood Star Cage. It is a cage formed by compressing 1/10 of my blood essence to the extreme. Even an expert at the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth might not be able to escape from it. But you, the bloodthirsty king sneered, and a trace of disdain flashed in his eyes. Obviously, in his eyes, it was impossible for Zhuo to break through this theurgy. The Blood Star Cage, as time passed, would continue to shrink until it was compressed to the size of a blood dot. And if the cultivator trapped in the Blood Star Cage was unable to escape, he would be continuously compressed until his blood essence was sucked dry by the compressed blood star, and his body and soul would be destroyed. And the cultivator's blood essence energy would become nutrients for the bloodthirsty king, helping his cultivation to advance further. Zhuo hovered in the center of the blood star. Suddenly, he put down his hands, and the huge divine soul sword intent around him dissipated into divine soul power and returned to the space between his eyebrows. Has he given up? A trace of pride flashed in the bloodthirsty king's eyes. In the extraterritorial battlefield, all the onlooking cultivators sighed. They understood that Zhuo was at his wit's end. His final fate had been determined. He would be compressed into a blood dot and become nutrients for the bloodthirsty king. What a pity! This Zhuo is a genius. As a reverse ancient star light realm cultivator, he went against the trend and fought the bloodthirsty king to this extent. It's really commendable. If Zhuo was given another 100 years, he might be able to defeat the bloodthirsty king. But now, his wings have yet to grow, and his halberd is going to be broken here. It's really a pity. Everyone sighed. The battle between Zhuo and the bloodthirsty king had won everyone's admiration. After all, Zhuo was just a rising star, while the bloodthirsty king was an overlord of the previous generation who had been roaming the 100 territories for countless years. Zhuo could fight the bloodthirsty king to this extent. It was really terrifying. Time passed second by second. The blood star surrounding Zhuo had shrunk to the point where it could barely accommodate one person. However, Zhuo was still standing with his hand by his side. He didn't do anything else, as if he was really waiting for death. The moment the blood star was about to shrink, Zhuo suddenly lifted his head. Golden light burst out from his eyes, as if there was a divine radiance. Bloodthirsty king, your power isn't bad, but if you want to kill me, it's still far from enough. Then Zhuo stood with his hands clasped behind his back. A terrifying gray light surged from his glabella. At first, the gray light was just the size of a dot. But after a few breaths, the gray light gushed out, turning into a gray ocean. This gray ocean was mighty and unstoppable. What was more terrifying was that in the gray ocean, terrifying waves were constantly rising. Each wave was enough to make people's hearts jump. Swish! The gray ocean swallowed 10,000 li like a tiger, overflowing everywhere. In the blink of an eye, the impregnable blood star divine cage was broken. The blood stars were scattered one by one. They were blown away at a terrifying speed, drawing long blood trails in the starry sky. What kind of power is this? The bloodthirsty king's eyes widened. He couldn't believe that the power he was so proud of was broken just like that. The extraterritorial battlefield fell into a strange silence. Chapter 46:25. Boundless Sea of Bitterness. Juan's expression was indifferent as he spat out the word. Stepping on the void with his right foot, he dashed toward the bloodthirsty king like a bolt of lightning. Splash! As soon as Juan dashed out, a terrifying sound of tsunamis rose around him. Endless water from the Sea of Bitterness surrounded Juan, protecting him in the center. The boundless Sea of Bitterness scripture and the great dark heaven palm print were Juan's most powerful spiritual powers. Once they were fully unleashed, they were much more powerful than the million-foot spiritual sword intent. In the starry sky, the formless gray sea whizzed over. Wherever it passed, the starry sky shattered. Before Juan arrived, the terrifying gray sea swept over and drowned the bloodthirsty king in an instant. The bloodthirsty king roared toward the sky. His body burst out with a terrifying blood-red light. Layers of blood-red armor covered his body. In an instant, the bloodthirsty king was swept away by the Sea of Bitterness. His entire body was submerged by the gray sea water. In the Sea of Bitterness, countless vengeful spirits rushed toward the bloodthirsty king, launching terrifying attacks one after another. The bloodthirsty king roared and waved his arms. A terrifying whirlpool was formed in the depths of the Sea of Bitterness to resist the endless vengeful spirits around him. At the same time, his four limbs moved quickly. He swam out of the Sea of Bitterness like a fish, trying to escape the range of the Sea of Bitterness. Unfortunately, the Sea of Bitterness seemed to be boundless. Although he swam extremely fast, he still could not escape the range of the Sea of Bitterness. He could only swim aimlessly. Damn it, what kind of spiritual powers is this? This boy is really not simple. The bloodthirsty king stopped in the middle of the Sea of Bitterness. His body was covered in a thick blood-red armor. He ignored the numerous vengeful spirits that pounced on him and bit him. He frowned. He was helpless against the boundless Sea of Bitterness. He even felt that the longer he stayed in the Sea of Bitterness, the heavier the pressure on his body. It was as if he was going to sink into the sea. He knew very well that if he did not find the exit soon, he would be in big trouble. Bloodthirsty king, stop struggling. The Sea of Bitterness is boundless. There is no shore to turn back. If you enter my Sea of Bitterness, you will sink into it forever. Within the Sea of Misery, Juan's voice that was vast like the might of the heavens resounded ceaselessly from all directions, and it echoed without end. The bloodthirsty king's face turned gloomy, and he snorted coldly. Juan, I admit that you are strong, but do you think you could defeat me with this? What wishful thinking. Speaking up to this point, the bloodthirsty monarch suddenly crossed his hands and formed a complicated seal with his 10 fingers. What was surprising was that when his hands finished forming the seal, the muscles all over his body suddenly burst out into a bloody mist. The blood mist seeped out and spread into the Sea of Bitterness. In an instant, it covered 50% of the Sea of Bitterness, turning it into a sea of blood. Divine ability, floating blood sea. Bloodthirsty king's hands were still crossed, but his eyes were solemn. Floating blood sea was the bloodthirsty king's most powerful ability. Its power was terrifying. However, the price to pay for this ability was extremely high. It could only be used by sacrificing one's own blood essence. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the huge lawful embodiment of heaven and earth of the bloodthirsty king was drying up at a speed visible to the naked eye. His huge body had shrunk by a third, and he was only about 700 feet tall. On the surface of the Sea of Bitterness, Juan's eyes suddenly narrowed. In the depths of the Sea of Bitterness, a huge blood-red color was spreading rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had covered half of the Sea of Bitterness. This half of the Sea of Blood seemed to have its own consciousness, and it started to fight against the Sea of Bitterness as an equal. Rip! Countless Sea of Bitterness was forced out, swept out, and returned to Juan's body. The Sea of Blood that was hidden under the Sea of Bitterness swept up a figure and quickly retreated, facing Juan from afar. as expected of the bloodthirsty king. He actually has such a powerful divine ability. Zhuowen looked at the blood-red figure floating above the sea of blood in surprise and muttered to himself. He knew very well how powerful the sea of bitterness was with his current spiritual power. Ordinary experts at the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth would definitely not be able to escape from it. However, the bloodthirsty king was able to escape so quickly, which was beyond his expectations. However, he could also see that the bloodthirsty king had paid a heavy price to escape successfully. After all, the latter's lawful embodiment of heaven and earth had shrunk by a third, which could be said to be a great loss to his vitality. Zhuowen, I miscalculated this time. I didn't expect you to be so strong. However, the final victory will still belong to me. The bloodthirsty king's eyes were gloomy. He stomped his right foot, and the sea of blood under his feet suddenly turned into a huge blood dragon, whistling through the starry sky and rolling over. Zhuowen was not afraid either. With a wave of his sleeve, the sea of bitterness around him turned into a gray dragon and swept over directly. Rumble. In an instant, the two dragons violently collided in the starry sky, setting off a series of terrifying explosions. It was as if the entire starry sky was going to collapse. The two dragons were too terrifying. As they entangled with each other, an unprecedented amount of terrifying explosive energy was produced every time they collided, causing terrifying cracks and black holes to appear one after another in the chaotic starry sky. Many powerful beings hidden in the depths of the chaotic starry sky retreated, not daring to approach casually. Zhuowen, your trump card is this sea of bitterness. Your sea of bitterness divine art has been restrained by me. You are no longer my opponent. The bloodthirsty king's right foot stomped on the void. His huge body was like a terrifying blood shadow, streaking across the starry sky and sweeping towards Zhuowen in an instant. Is that so? Zhuowen was suspended in the starry sky on a huge meteorite. It was as if time had stopped. He calmly stared at the bloodthirsty king, who was getting closer and closer. In an instant, the bloodthirsty king had already closed in on Zhuowen. His right hand formed a palm and slammed down heavily. The lawful embodiment of heaven and earth of the bloodthirsty king was too huge. Even though it had shrunk a lot due to the loss of blood essence, it was still much bigger than Zhuowen's. In front of the bloodthirsty king, Zhuowen was as small as an ant. He was too insignificant. Little bastard, are you going to die without a fight? The bloodthirsty king looked down at Zhuowen coldly and murmured with a cold gaze. Zhuowen's expression was indifferent. He gently stomped his right foot forward. Suddenly, the space within a radius of several million feet started to tremble. Immediately, 4 huge light pillars appeared around Zhuowen. In each light pillar, there was a huge starry sky giant. The starry sky giants were holding up a huge starry sky world with their hands. 4 starry sky worlds? The bloodthirsty king looked at the 4 starry sky worlds around Zhuowen. His pupils shrank as he exclaimed in shock. He had never seen a starry sky world of a starry sky world of a starry sky world. It was unbelievable that there were 4 of them. Chapter 46:26. Rumble. The huge palm fell and landed heavily on the Starlight World at the front. The Starlight World couldn't withstand the terrifying power of the palm, and many cracks appeared on its surface. The Starlight Giant that held the Starlight World up knelt on the ground with one knee. Break! The bloodthirsty king's face was gloomy. The muscles on his body swelled, and his strength doubled. He destroyed the first Starlight World in one fell swoop. The Starlight Giant, who was holding up the Starlight World, was slapped to the ground and fell into the depths of the black hole that was blasted into a huge crack. Bang! 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 Immediately after, the other 3 Starlight Worlds were destroyed by the bloodthirsty king's terrifying palm. Zhuowen, the gap between the ancient Starlight World and the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, is too big. So what if you have 4 Starlight Worlds? If you still had the Divine Soul ability, I might still be afraid. But with your cultivation, you're courting death if you try to fight me." The bloodthirsty king grinned, and his face was full of malevolence. He knew very well that once Zhuan's boundless sea of suffering was restrained by his floating blood sea, Zhuan was as good as dead in his eyes. This was because Zhuan had nothing that could compete with him. Zhuan is at his wit's end. This is the end for him. Everyone watched as the 4 starlight worlds were destroyed and Zhuan was retreating. They knew very well that Zhuan was doomed. Unless Zhuan could still use a divine soul superpower that was not weaker than the boundless sea of suffering, but that was basically impossible. Zhuan was already very lucky to have such a powerful divine soul superpower. If he had 2, it would be really heaven-defying. "Zhuan, you can't escape." The bloodthirsty king strode in the starry sky and rushed towards Zhuan, closing in on him step by step. His palms continued to attack, forming blood-red palm prints one after another, densely covering Zhuan. In just an instant, Zhuan's 4 sides were covered by palm prints, and he already had nowhere to retreat. "Die!" The bloodthirsty king burst out laughing. His right palm suddenly pressed down, and countless blood-red palm prints pressed down, covering Zhuan's entire body and crushing him. In the blink of an eye, Zhuan's figure had already disappeared from everyone's sight. It ends here, within the supreme, ancient, heavenly Tao Academy's encampment. Sakyamuni, Jin Dao, Dharmaraja, and the others silently looked at the image floating above. They naturally saw the result of the battle in the chaotic starry skies and knew that the battle was over. Zhuan's only strong point was his divine soul, divine ability. After the boundless sea of bitterness was restrained by the bloodthirsty king's floating sea of blood, Zhuan would definitely die in a head-on clash. Just when everyone thought that the outcome of the battle had been decided, in the depths of the chaotic starry sky, surrounded by countless blood-red palm prints, an indifferent and crisp voice rang out. "Bloodthirsty king, you're much weaker than before. The floating sea of blood must have caused quite a lot of damage to you." As soon as the voice came out, both inside and outside of the extraterritorial battlefield fell into silence. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the place where the blood-red palm prints were enveloping. The bloodthirsty king's eyes turned gloomy, and there was a thick sense of horror in the depths of his eyes. Boom! Suddenly, the encirclement formed by the blood-red palm prints exploded with a loud bang. A huge golden palm print suddenly stretched out. With unparalleled momentum, it pushed horizontally and blasted towards the bloodthirsty king. "I have more than just 2 types of divine soul, divine abilities." A figure stood above the golden palm print with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked down at the bloodthirsty king in front of him and said indifferently, "You?" The bloodthirsty king's face completely changed. He roared angrily, and both of his palms blasted forward. The divine power in his body surged out like a tide. Instantly, the bloodthirsty king's huge body emitted a blood-red light. It was as if his entire body had been dyed red by fresh blood. It was extremely strange. Blood God's tyrant fist. The bloodthirsty king's right hand clenched into a fist and punched forward. A terrifying fist wind whizzed out and formed 9 blood-red divine dragons. They slammed heavily on the golden palm print under Zhuan's feet. Crack! However, the bloodthirsty king's face turned ugly when the 9 blood-red divine dragons collided with the golden palm print and dispersed. What? The bloodthirsty king's eyes narrowed. Although the fist wind's power was only 1/10 of the blood god's tyrant fist's power, it was a little unbelievable that it could be destroyed so easily. "Bloodthirsty king, the one who should die is not me, but you," Zhuan said slowly. His voice was like rolling thunder that resounded through the entire chaotic starry sky. "I don't believe it." The bloodthirsty king no longer hesitated. He completely let go of his worries and punched out heavily. The power of this fist was too terrifying. Everyone could only see a terrifying blood-red light flickering. Then, they involuntarily closed their eyes and covered their ears. Their 7 orifices were affected and blood flowed out. The golden palm print was too fast. It was too close to him. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. The only way was to face it head-on. Rumble. The power of the fist and the palm print collided. In an instant, time seemed to have completely stopped. The onlookers felt that the world had fallen into an indescribable silence. They felt that everything was so slow. This feeling disappeared in a flash. The phenomenon of time stopping disappeared. What followed was an earth-shattering explosion. Countless huge cracks appeared in the starry sky. The barrier at the border of the extraterritorial battlefield shook even more violently. It was as if it would shatter at any time. Many of the cultivators standing at the border were on tenterhooks. They were afraid that the barrier would shatter and they would be swept into the terrifying collision. Bang! After the earth-shattering explosion, a figure in a sorry state quickly flew out and crashed heavily into the invisible barrier. Everyone looked over and saw that it was the bloodthirsty king. They all sucked in a breath of cold air. They saw that the huge, lawful embodiment of heaven and earth of the bloodthirsty king had shrunk once again. It shrunk from 70 feet to 50 feet. The muscles on his body had shrunk until he was only skin and bones. At this moment, the bloodthirsty king's aura was extremely weak. He was no longer as majestic as before. No wonder he is an expert at the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Bloodthirsty king, I wonder how many times you can forcefully use your essence blood to increase your own strength? A blazing golden light appeared from the chaotic starry sky. In the dazzling golden light, Zhuan arrived on the golden palm print. The golden palm print under his feet was badly damaged. The golden light had dimmed. However, Zhuan was completely unaffected, not affected in the slightest. Oh no, Zhuan is too powerful. He has exceeded all of our expectations. We have to hurry over. In the Archean Heavenly Academy's encampment, the Ice Demon King slammed the table and stood up. The killing intent in his eyes seemed to have materialized. Let's go. Let's go and kill this guy. The Golden Blade Discipline King also stood up and said with a murderous aura. Whoosh! In the pavilion, all the experts stood up in an instant. Everyone felt the powerful threat from Zhuan. They knew that if they gave him more time, even if they joined forces in the future, they might not be able to suppress him. This was a huge threat to all of them. They had to eliminate him in advance. Chapter 46:28. Zhuan, do you have any last words? Sakyamuni stood outside the encirclement, supporting the heavily injured, bloodthirsty king. He looked down at Zhuan, who was in the middle of the encirclement, and said indifferently, Last words. Zhuan sneered and continued, You really can't kill me. Why do you need last words? How arrogant and conceited. With us here, do you think you can survive? Golden Blade Discipline King sneered and patted the armrest of his throne with his right hand. Instantly, countless golden blades flew out from the throne and turned into a terrifying golden dragon, rushing towards Zhuan. This guy's strength is not simple. Golden Blade Discipline King, and I will hold him back first. Then you guys wait for the chance to attack. We must kill him in one fell swoop. We must not give him the chance to attack us one by one. After the Ice Demon King instructed the other experts, he rushed towards Zhuan from behind. The snowstorm surrounding him was even more terrifying. In an instant, Zhuan was attacked from both sides and seemed to be in danger. Zhuan's eyes narrowed. Whether it was Golden Blade Discipline King or the Ice Demon King, both of them were at the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Their auras were even stronger than the bloodthirsty king. When the two of them attacked together, even Zhuan felt the pressure. Thinking of this, Zhuan did not hesitate and blasted out 2 Xintian handprints. The huge golden handprints split into 2, one in front and one behind, and blasted towards Golden Blade Discipline King and the Ice Demon King respectively. Rumble. The golden handprint collided with the massive golden dragon, and an earth-shattering explosion erupted. Terrifying energy ripples spread out in all directions like a tidal wave, shattering the endless cracks in space. The golden handprints in the back clashed with the Ice Demon King's lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. What made Juwon's face turn ugly was that the ice armor that the Ice Demon King was wearing was extremely hard. The golden handprints could not cause any damage to him. In an instant, Golden Blade, Discipline King, the Ice Demon King, and Juon were in a deadlock. They were neck and neck. Everyone in the foreign battlefield sucked in a breath of cold air when they saw this. This Juon was really powerful. He was evenly matched with Golden Blade Fu Wang and Ice Fiend King at the same time. It was too terrifying. Are you still not going to make a move? The Ice Demon King shouted. The Ghost Child, Shakyamuni Jin Quan, Yin Zhongzi, Golden Lamp Shakyamuni, and other experts who had been in a daze came to their senses and rushed toward Juon. Their bodies were filled with terrifying and powerful auras. At this moment, Juon was fully focused on dealing with Golden Blade Dharma King and the Ice Demon King's attacks. He waved his right hand in the air, and a huge crack appeared in the starry sky before him. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the depths of the starry sky, divine sabers with terrifying auras flew out. There were a total of 12 of them, floating behind Jindao Fuwang, shining brightly. The 12 divine sabers were all gilded with gold. The only difference was that different strange patterns were drawn on the surface of the divine sabers. Upon closer inspection, the patterns on the 12 divine sabers corresponded to the 12 animals of the zodiac. They were Zishu, Cho Ox, Yin Tiger, Mao Rabbit, Chun Dragon, Sea Snake, Wu Horse, Wei Sheep, Shin Monkey, Yu Rooster, Su Dog, and High Pig. It's Jindao Dharmaraja's zodiac divine saber. It's a divine weapon at the peak of the fourth sky of the eternal realm. He hasn't used such a divine weapon for a long time. When Jindao Dharmaraja took out the 12 divine sabers, most of the cultivators in the extraterritorial battlefield were in an uproar. Their eyes were filled with fear and respect. Jindao Dharmaraja was in existence second only to Jinzun Dharmaraja in the Divine Spark region. He was most famous for his Zodiac Divine Saber. It was said that the Zodiac Divine Saber was more terrifying than the previous one. In the entire super region, other than Jinzun Dharmaraja, no one had ever made him use the 12th saber. The Ice Fiend King's eyes narrowed slightly. He took a deep breath and formed a complicated and strange magic array in front of him. In the magic array, a Fangtian halberd that was millions of feet long slowly appeared. This Fangtian halberd was ice blue. The body of the halberd was covered with dense and complicated patterns. These patterns were like small tadpoles. They seemed to have spirituality. They gradually moved around the body of the halberd, causing the body of the halberd to constantly flash with ice blue flowing light. Dark Ice Overlord Halberd. This is also a divine weapon at the peak of the fourth sky of the eternal realm. The Ice Fiend King and Jindao Dharmaraja are indeed the top existences in the super region. They both have divine weapons of this level. Everyone's eyes became more and more serious. Whether it was the Ice Fiend King or Jindao Dharmaraja, their strength and foundation were too profound. The Bloodthirsty King, on the other hand, paled in comparison to the two of them. Although the Bloodthirsty King was also at the peak of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, his strength was not as strong as the Ice Fiend King and Jindao Dharmaraja. Moreover, he did not have a powerful divine weapon. That was why the Bloodthirsty King was defeated by Juon in the end. However, the Ice Fiend King and Jindao Dharmaraja were different. Both of them were much stronger than the Bloodthirsty King. Together with their powerful divine weapons, they could easily kill the Bloodthirsty King. Juon's expression was serious. Sakyamuni, aren't you afraid that Jindo Fawang will see you attacking us so brazenly? Can you withstand his anger? Gold Authority King asked calmly. Sakyamuni's smile became even more complacent. He said, Gold Authority King, look around you. King of Gold Authority looked around, and only then did he realize that the surroundings had unknowingly been filled with dense formation Tao ripples, forming an airtight domain that enveloped them within. This is a divine concealment array. Whatever happens here, the outside world won't be able to sense it. Jindo Fawang won't suspect us. He'll only think that I set up this array to protect all of you. Sakyamuni stood with his hands behind his back. He continued, After I refine all of you, the battle outside will almost be over. That Zhuoan is really strong. I estimate that the final result will be a lose-lose situation. At that time, I'll just sit back and reap the benefits. Gold Authority King was trembling with anger. He kept struggling, but he couldn't break free from Sakyamuni's restraints. Sakyamuni sneered. He suddenly swung his right hand, and a terrifying divine power erupted. Gold Authority King was ruthlessly thrown to the ground. The bones in his body cracked, and blood splattered everywhere. Then, Sakyamuni stepped forward. He lifted his foot and stomped heavily. He didn't hold back at all. He ruthlessly stomped Gold Authority King to the ground. Gold Authority King screamed in pain. Blood spurted out from his mouth. His face was pale. I'll start with you. Sakyamuni bent down. The sword finger on his right hand pointed at Gold Authority King's forehead. At the same time, the golden vertical bar on Sakyamuni's forehead slowly split open, revealing a golden eye. The eye kept moving in the eye socket as if it had intelligence. Suddenly, the eye fell on Gold Authority King below. A golden light shot out from the eye and rushed into Gold Authority King's forehead. Ah! Gold Authority King screamed in pain. She could clearly feel that the divine power in her body was being absorbed. Not only that, her divine soul, law embodiment of heaven and earth, Tao root, and other talents were all peeled off and entered Sakyamuni's body through his sword finger. As expected of one of the 4 Tao kings of the divine flame domain, your talents, divine soul, and Tao root are so delicious. Sakyamuni looked intoxicated. The aura in his body was increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Just as Sakyamuni was attacking Gold Authority King and the others, the battle outside the domain had reached its climax. Gold Authority King and the Ice Demon King surrounded Mu Foam from the front and the back. Each of them displayed their abilities. Terrifying energy poured out endlessly, setting off waves of explosions that were more terrifying than the last. The 11th blade, Su Dog Blade, XDW8 Gold Authority King roared to the sky. His sword finger pointed to the void and slashed out the 11th blade. Chapter 46-32. Boom, boom, boom. An unprecedentedly terrifying explosion erupted in the extraterrestrial star. Dense cracks appeared in the extraterrestrial star, forming countless huge ravines. Moreover, the number and range of the ravines became wider and wider, becoming more and more terrifying. The nearest border of the extraterritorial battlefield was completely affected. It started to tremble, and layers of terrifying ripples appeared one after another. The cultivators in the extraterrestrial star looked at the border in front of them in fear, shock rising in their hearts. This time, the shockwave from the collision were too terrifying, far more intense and powerful than any of the previous ones. They could clearly feel that the extraterrestrial star's border barrier seemed to be unable to hold on at any time and was about to shatter. Crack! Crack! Suddenly, a crisp shattering sound rang out. It was distant and clear, and it was very clear in everyone's ears. Oh no, the extraterrestrial star's border barrier has shattered. It can't be. This extraterrestrial star's border barrier was set up by many mighty figures working together, but it actually shattered. How terrifying is this battle? Run. Once the extraterrestrial star's border barrier shatters, we'll all die. In an instant, The cultivators in the extraterrestrial star's battlefield who had been watching the battle all this time had hideous expressions due to fear, and they started to flee madly. The extraterrestrial star's border barrier was extremely powerful, but even this barrier couldn't stop it, let alone them. If they still didn't flee, what awaited them would be a tragic death. In the end, the extraterrestrial star's border barrier completely shattered, turning into countless fragments of light that scattered between heaven and earth. At the same time, a terrifying shockwave from the collision surged over with unparalleled momentum, completely drowning the extraterrestrial star's border. In an instant, the extraterrestrial star's border completely exploded, the ground collapsed, and space collapsed. Some of the slower cultivators were swept up by the energy torrent and instantly disappeared without leaving behind even a trace. Even more cultivators had already fled far away, not daring to get close at all. Even some of the cultivators who were curious about the outcome of the battle didn't care at all. After all, if they didn't flee, what awaited them was only death. Damn it, the final battle is starting so soon. On the other side, the formation that Sakyamuni had set up was brutally torn apart by the torrent of energy. Sakyamuni cursed in a low voice. Then, with the ghost child and the ghost god king, he turned into a beam of golden light and shot into the distance. Sakura's speed was extremely fast. He actually left the area enveloped by the energy torrent first and landed on a huge fragment of the continent. So powerful. Nephew Shirtion, who do you think will win? If you force our Jinzuin Shakyamuni to come out of seclusion, you and the entire alternate ghost region will die without a burial place. Jinzuin Shakyamuni roared furiously, but there was a trace of fear in the depths of his eyes. His perception was extremely sharp. He could faintly feel that Sakyamuni's aura was very terrifying. It was much more terrifying and powerful than the Ice Demon King. After all, this person had devoured so many lawful embodiment of heaven and earth experts. Even if he hadn't reached the all-in-one level, he was basically invincible against any lawful embodiment of heaven and earth cultivators. If Jinzuin Shakyamuni was at his peak, he might be able to fight against Sakyamuni. But now, he was severely injured and his condition was extremely poor. Moreover, Sakyamuni had the Ice Demon King by his side. No matter how proud Jinzuin Shakyamuni was, he didn't think that he could fight against two people at the same time. Ha ha ha. Jinzuin Shakyamuni, you're already so old. Why are you still so stupid? Sakyamuni looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. His eyes were filled with mockery. Jinzuin Shakyamuni was furious and said, "What do you mean? Jinzuin Shakyamuni, what's the purpose of so many experts gathering together? Isn't it to encircle and kill that Zhuoan? The first suspect for your deaths is only that Zhuoan. Plus, the onlookers in the extraterritorial battlefield have all fled. There are no witnesses at all. Do you think that anyone will believe that the ones who killed you are people like us who share the same hatred as you?" Sakyamuni said calmly. Jinzuin Shakyamuni's expression froze. He naturally understood what Sakyamuni meant. He was planning to make Zhuoan the scapegoat. Shirtion, hurry up and do it. If those cultivators come back, we won't be able to explain ourselves. The Ice Demon King waved the halberd in his right hand. Instantly, the entire space was filled with the terrifying sound of cloth being torn apart. All right, let's do it together. Sakyamuni nodded. His entire body shone with golden light. His feet suddenly stepped on the ground, and a pair of golden divine wings grew out from his back. The golden divine wings flapped gently, and Sakyamuni instantly appeared in front of Jinzuin Shakyamuni. He punched heavily on Jinzuin Shakyamuni's chest. So fast, Jinzuin Shakyamuni's pupils shrank. He was caught off guard and was hit by Sakyamuni's punch. His whole body flew backward again. The moment he flew backward, the Ice Demon King came around. He held the dark ice overlord halberd with both hands and chopped down heavily on Jinzun Shakyamuni's head. Jinzun Shakyamuni didn't even think about it. He took out 12 divine swords and blocked behind him, forming a golden wall of swords. Clang! The dark ice overlord halberd and the wall of swords collided. Jinzun Shakyamuni groaned and couldn't help but step back. And the moment he retreated, Sakura attacked again with an imposing manner. Chapter 46-34. As expected of Golden Blade Shakyamuni, ranked second among the 4 great Shakyamuni of the divine spark domain. No matter if it's divine power or divine soul, it's much stronger than other cultivators of the celestial phenomenon of heaven and earth. The taste is also much more delicious. Sakyamuni's eyes revealed an intoxicated look as she began to rapidly absorb Golden Blade Shakyamuni's energy. Golden Blade Shakyamuni kept struggling, but he found that it was useless. His entire body was completely confined by the divine power of the Ice Fiend King and Sakyamuni. He couldn't move at all. Sakyamuni, I beg you to let me go. Golden Blade Shakyamuni saw his body rapidly shriveling and his divine soul drying up. The fear of death rose in his mind. Sakyamuni sneered and said, "Let you go? Golden Blade Shakyamuni, don't be so naive. Today, you're destined to become my food." Far away in the depths of the fragment continent, Zhuowen was frowning as he observed Sakyamuni absorbing Golden Blade Shakyamuni's energy. He could clearly feel that Sakyamuni's aura was becoming stronger again. No, I can't let Sakyamuni absorb anymore. Zhuowen's eyes were hazy as he gradually mobilized his aura. Just as Zhuowen was about to make a move, he suddenly exclaimed in surprise. In his great world, an unprecedented, terrifying aura surged. He probed into the great world with his divine sense and immediately heard Xiao Hei's surprised and wild laughter. Ha ha ha! This Dragon Master has finally broken through. From now on, this Dragon Master will be a genuine rank 9 astral soldier. In the center island of the great world, Xiao Hei jumped up. The terrifying aura on her body unscrupulously exploded, causing the entire great world to shake violently. Xiao Hei, you've finally come out. Zhuowen's divine sense touched Xiao Hei's, and he was pleasantly surprised. Xiao Hei, who had broken through to become a rank 9 astral soldier, was a timely reign to him now. Huh, kid, the golden sword embryo inside the stone sword in the ruins is really good stuff. After completely absorbing that thing, my grade rose by a whole lot. Even I didn't expect the High Abyss Sacred Sword to rise to tier 9 so quickly. Xiao Hei's face was full of excitement as she continued. Moreover, my cultivation base has reached the peak of 4th heavenly layer, Eternal Realm. One unexpected gain. Zhuowen nodded and said seriously, Xiao Hei, I have a mission for you. With your current strength, I think you can complete it perfectly. Xiao Hei was stunned, and then she looked suspiciously at Zhuowen and said, Kid, this Dragon Lord has just broken through, and you're already giving me a mission. Isn't this a bit too much? The situation is urgent. It's like this. Zhuowen didn't talk nonsense with Xiao Hei and told her what had just happened in full detail. Xiao Hei listened and said angrily, This Sakyamuni is too abnormal. Chapter 46-35. Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, the Taiyu sacred sword clashed with Sakyamuni dozens of times. The terrifying sword chi spread out, almost covering the entire starry sky, tearing it into 1,000 holes. Sakyamuni's face was gloomy. The golden light around his body was like the sun, emitting an indelible radiance as he clashed with the Taiyu sacred sword like a god or a demon. But the more he resisted, the more chaotic Sakyamuni's breathing became. He was already suffering from a backlash due to the Taiyu sacred sword interrupting the devouring process, and had already suffered some internal injuries. Now, Xiaohei was being aggressive, not giving Sakyamuni a chance to recover at all, almost suppressing him, not giving him a chance to breathe. Bastard, this guy. Sakyamuni was fuming with anger. The timing of the Taiyu sacred sword was too accurate. Almost every move forced Sakyamuni to resist with all his might, firmly locking his lifeline. Kaboom! Another terrifying explosion. Sakyamuni spat out a mouthful of blood and could not help but fly out. On his chest, he was accidentally pierced by a sword chi, and a large wound was opened. Golden blood kept flowing out, spraying into the starry sky. Jindo Dharmaraja was still being held in his left hand, but because Sakyamuni was held back by the Taiyu's sacred sword, Jindo Dharmaraja had a chance to breathe. Jindo Dharmaraja's eyes shone with a sharp light. His right hand formed a seal, and the 12 effective swords suddenly merged into one and slashed heavily at Sakyamuni. At that moment, Sakyamuni's attention was all on Xiaohei, and he did not expect Jindo Dharmaraja to suddenly counterattack. In a moment of carelessness, the giant sword formed from the 12 zodiac swords landed heavily on his body. Sakyamuni's reaction was extremely fast, and the divine power in his body swam like a dragon, covering his entire body, forming layer after layer of thick golden barriers. The giant sword slammed into the golden barrier, and a terrifying energy ripple exploded, causing the barrier to tremble violently. What made Jindo Dharmaraja fearful was that his all-out attack was still unable to break through Sakyamuni's golden barrier. When the golden barrier dimmed and was about to shatter, the broadsword had already dissipated. What a pity. I'm too weak right now. Otherwise, I would have heavily injured Sakyamuni. Jindo Dharmaraja sighed softly in his heart. Deep in his eyes, there was a hint of regret. Sakyamuni, on the other hand, let out a sigh of relief. After blocking Jindo Fuwang's desperate strike, he waved his right hand and pointed between Jindo Fuwang's eyebrows. If Golden Blade Fuwang didn't die, staying by his side would be a disaster. Pucci! Sakyamuni's left finger pointed at Jindo Fuwang's forehead and completely destroyed his soul. His right hand, on the other hand, was using all kinds of secret techniques to fight fiercely with the Taiyu Saint's sword. However, he was completely unaware that an invisible stream of water was slowly approaching him from behind without a sound. When this invisible stream of water was completely behind Sakyamuni, it immediately turned into a human figure. Zhuowen was seen holding the Tai Emperor's seal and pouring all of his divine power into it. He mercilessly smashed it onto Sakyamuni's body. What? Zhuowen? When did you? Sakyamuni was immediately alerted. He quickly turned his head and saw the Tai Emperor's seal crashing down on him. He couldn't help but yell in shock. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's timing was too accurate. It was the exact moment when Sakyamuni attacked Jindo Fuwang and Xiaohei at the same time. He didn't have any energy left to block Zhuowen's attack. Sakyamuni, you're really good at scheming, but you probably didn't realize that the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. In the end, you've become the mantis, and I've become the oriole. Zhuowen's cold voice could be heard. The Tai Emperor's seal smashed heavily onto Sakyamuni's back. Crack! The crisp sound of bones cracking could be heard. The Tai Emperor's seal's power was too terrifying. With this attack, Sakyamuni's spine was smashed into pieces. Uffed! Sakyamuni spat out a mouthful of blood. He fell from the sky in a sorry state. His body exploded into balls of golden blood mist. Shirtian, the Ice Demon King, was shocked. He quickly rushed toward the falling Sakyamuni, wanting to save him. Unfortunately, as soon as the Ice Demon King rushed out, he was stopped by a terrifying sword chi. Old man, we're teaching our son a lesson. Why are you interfering? Do you believe that I'll kill you? Xiaohei crossed his claws in front of his chest and looked at the Ice Demon King from the corner of his eyes. He had the demeanor of an expert. Stupid dog, you're courting death. The Ice Demon King gritted his teeth. He held the profound ice overlord halberd and smashed it toward Xiaohei mercilessly. The Taiyu sacred sword was indeed a rank 9 astral weapon. However, Because it had just been promoted, Xiaohei couldn't unleash its full power. The Ice Demon King naturally noticed this, so he wasn't afraid of Xiaohei. "Old man, how dare you call your grandfather a stupid dog? How disgraceful! See if your grandfather doesn't beat the shit out of you today." Xiaohei was flustered and exasperated. He waved his little claws, and the Taiyu's sacred sword flew across the sky, carrying with it a bright and terrifying sword aura. While the Ice Demon King and Xiaohei were fighting, Zhuowen took advantage of the situation. He held the Tai Emperor seal and smashed it towards Sakyamuni. Now that Sakyamuni was heavily injured and his breathing was chaotic, it was the best opportunity to kill the former. Zhuowen knew very well that if he hadn't injured Sakyamuni while he was devouring Sakyamuni, he might not have been able to hurt Sakyamuni now. Sakyamuni was on the defensive,